Hey guys, it's Jason here, and I'm back for number 9 in these Amp Chat live streams, and absolutely stoked to be joined today by Mike Smith. Hey Mike, how you doing?
How's it going?
Yeah, it's going good, man. So Mike and I have known each other for a little while, just kind of communicating, and just one of the awesome contacts that I've kind of managed to make and connect with through this amp community of professional builders and designers, and had the absolute pleasure of meeting Mike face to face when you came down with Slipknot to Melbourne, Australia,
That was a good
back
time.
in, it was late March, wasn't it?
Yeah, late March.
Yeah. So that was an awesome. I mean, it was just fantastic to finally meet, right, and actually
Yeah,
kind of go and have a few beers and hang out
good
and
pizza,
stuff.
good beers. Yeah,
Yeah, we did have good pizzas, good beers, and we were led. I think we were led to the pub by Bob Strakel, who does front of house sound for
yes, he
Slipknot.
does. Yes, he
He knew
was.
all the places to go, which was
Yep,
weird because it was meant to be me showing you where to go, but Bob already knew.
he's
Um,
been there a couple times.
yeah, I bet he has. I bet he has. I can see Bob's in the chat actually, so we're going to get to his
Hi,
question
Bob.
at some point. He wants. He's going to ask you. Anyway, we'll get to that.
Yeah,
Um, there's a few guys in the chat here. I want to say hi, Ryan. Yeah, Mike is the man, definitely. So,
what's going on, Ryan?
yeah, we're going to start, guys. Do obviously, if you've got questions for Mike, put them in the chat, right? And we will absolutely get to them. We're going to spend a couple of hours here, so we've got time to get through stuff. I'm going to start just by kind of talking with Mike a bit about his journey with the company, with Omega Ampworks, how he got into it, and we'll kind of go from there. I do want to talk to Mike a bit about the whole gig with Mick Thompson and Slipknot as well, and kind of how that happened, and a bit about what's involved in making all of that work and successful, because that's, to me, and I'm sure to the guys on the stream here, is an endlessly fascinating subject. And when Mike was down with the band, I was lucky enough to kind of get a very small glimpse into that world backstage, and it's pretty mind blowing to say the least. Right? The scale of that is just pretty mind blowing. But man, if we
Yeah.
start at the beginning, how did Omega Ampworks start, and how did you kind of get into this game?
So, 2008, and it kind of starts in a weird place. I won't go into too much detail about how it started, but 2008, I was not 100% happy with the job that I was at. It was very temporary, and met a guy who came into a Sam Ash music store that I was working at, just temporary, and set up a guitar for him. His name is Chris Towning. Hey, Chris. He just moved to Australia, by the way.
Oh, right.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
cool.
Chris played in a band called Bury Your Dead, and he needed a guitar set up, so I set the guitar up for him. He really liked it. He brought another guitar back the next day and wanted me to do some stuff on it. And then basically hit me up like a week later and asked if I wanted to hang out and meet some guys, meet the rest of the band. And then he asked me if I wanted to go on tour. So I said, screw it. Quit my job, went on tour for no pay for a couple months. And
That's awesome.
essentially, what that did was that kind of fueled the fire for me wanting to do something in the music industry. We did a couple tours.
So you went on
Once,
tour. Sorry to interrupt, Mike, but you went on
yeah,
tour as a guitar
as a
tech,
guitar
or
tech, yeah.
and what was your background prior to that? Could you kind of, were you a luthier? Could you do setups like?
No, no. So I mean, I'd been playing guitar since I was 12. So that was, way in the olden days.
Yeah, like me.
Um, yeah. And I had always worked on my own guitars. I'd always set them up,
Yeah,
and
cool.
I had a pretty particular way that I like to set guitars up. And I have I, I have a lot of attention to detail with some things. So working in a guitar store, I got to work on guitars all the time and mess with amps and stuff like that. So that's kind of where that background came from. Um, and basically, once we got done with tour, we weren't 100% happy with some of the speaker cabs that the guys were using. I won't name the brands, but decided, you know what, I want to build a cab and see what happens. And it quickly unfolded and decided, 2009, let's do something just part time. And then it kind of went on from there.
Had you so yeah, I remember you when you came down and we had a bit of a chat. You talked about this kind of thing starting with cabinets.
Yeah.
Had you done much with woodwork before that? It was just kind of like
Eh,
straight into that side of it.
in high school, yes, but
Yeah.
not a whole lot after that. I've always been really hands-on with stuff. I love engineering. I love how things work. So, um, me and my brother used to build stuff and make stuff explode all the time. So it was, but the woodworking aspect of it came pretty quickly to me, actually.
That's amazing. And did you like? Did it kind of like start to become something that you built those cabs? They started to get used by that band, and then others took interest in it. Like, how did it kind
Yeah,
of grow
actually,
into?
the first band that we started working with, they were friends of ours. It was a band called The Ghost Inside, and um, after we had built a couple prototypes of just like 1x12s and 1x15s, they were all ported cabs using the Electro Voice EVM 12L and EVM 15L, and they were supposed to be supplemental cabs to, existing 4x12s or something else.
Okay,
And
right.
I brought one out, a 2x12, for the guys, from our buddies from Amur to try out. And word quickly got around, and my buddy Aaron, that was in the Ghost Inside at the time, said, "Hey, I want something. Let's do something crazy." And they ordered 412 115s. So it was all in one
Four
cab.
115s.
It was a terrible design, but they loved them. It sounded awesome. It was
Hang on, so
so insanely
four
heavy.
12s and 115 in a
Yes.
single cab.
Yeah, and the 15 was actually, it
My
had a
God.
passive crossover network. So the 15
Okay,
was only there for low end, and the 12s were there for all the good guitar stuff.
that's
So
insane.
we
What?
weren't the first ones by any means to do, low frequency drivers for guitar. Like Rivera had already done stuff. A couple other people had done things, but we wanted to implement it in a little bit different way. So
What's the What do you think? What are the key things that make a cabinet sound good? Is it the wood? Is it the joints? Is it like a bit of everything?
I I mean,
What's
that's
the
a
most important
very,
thing?
very subjective question, but in my opinion, the way that we do things, I'll base it from my perspective
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah. No, please do.
everybody has their own, opinion on voicing for things. Um, it all plays a role. It's all balance, in my opinion. So when you actually look at the airspace and you look at all the parameters of the volume of a cab and match it to the speakers and match it to the Thiel small parameters, getting the correct Q, getting the, matching everything right, that's where you actually start to really uh, see benefits from proper design. Um, then you have to look at material use. So, Baltic birch versus MDF versus particle board, et cetera. Everything kind of has a different sound because everything resonates differently. And when everything resonates differently, it's actually going to affect the speaker itself. If you have something that's insanely braced, that has very little vibration, the speaker itself is actually going to be a little bit more efficient, and it's going to provide a little bit more of a clear sound of what it's trying to portray from the beginning. Because when you're looking at, say, the front and the rear baffle, the front baffle is what the speaker is attached to.
Yep.
A speaker is a resonating, vibrating transducer. If you have the front baffle that is actually starting to vibrate as well, you can actually start to take away from the efficiency of that driver by having actual phase issues because the speaker may be wanting to push out. But at that time, if the cone is actually moving faster than the front baffle, which it would because it's very
Yeah.
light,
Yep.
when the baffle is moving a little bit, you can actually get inefficiencies. So now that doesn't mean that's a bad thing because there's numerous companies over the years that have used thinner woods that actually they want to vibrate, and those cabs sound phenomenal. Um, but like I said, it's a very subjective thing. And there's a tremendous amount to it. But the way that we approach it is overall balance. We want to make sure that the cab isn't too bass heavy, too mid-range forward, or too bright on the top
Yeah.
end. And we essentially design our cabs with different, with the proper airspace for the formula that I created, using the proper thickness of wood, which we use 5/8. thickness wood, which is same as what Marshall does,
Yep.
15 millimeter.
Yep.
And we front load our cabs because we actually prefer the additional projection, the additional mid-range forward nature that it gives. It's a little bit more clear overall. And, the bracing internally and the baffling internally can actually assist with uh, dampening vibrations in certain areas that you don't want to, have additional resonance, as well as decreasing standing waves internally. So you actually have a little bit clear low frequency.
Yeah, man, that's fascinating. Because one of the things that occurred to me when you were describing that is that that kind of comment about balance, if you like, and I
Yeah,
couldn't help but think of the similarities with circuit design and an amplifier, where you got this you've got this kind of end goal in mind, right? You've got the sound in your head, say that you're seeking to reproduce, and of course, when you're looking at circuit design for an amplifier across the preamp stages and the power amp, the whole thing has to be kind of in balance to achieve that outcome.
absolutely.
It's some of the components, if you like, but I don't mean actual resistors and caps. I mean like the stages or the architecture of that design. Very similar concept, right? In terms of everything from the type of wood, the dimensions, front loading, rear loading, all that kind of stuff. It's pretty fascinating.
Absolutely. I mean, everything plays a role. I mean, speakers have such a massive effect on the end sound, and small changes within a speaker itself, not the speaker cabinet, but the actual, transducer itself. I mean, it's insane. Just the actual doping on the outside, the adhesives used, the stiffness of the suspension, the spider. Everybody thinks, everything, it's just the cone. It's the cone is only a small part of it, even down to the magnet, the metal that's used, what kind
Yeah,
of carbon content the metal is, how
yeah,
thick the back plate, the front plate are, the voice coil gap, every single thing plays a role. And like we were discussing before, it's everything is resonance, and music instruments, from the strings to the body to the way that the pickups are picking it up. And um, it all plays a crucial role in finding that formula that people like, and that you like yourself, is paramount to achieving a unique sound that's different from everybody else.
Have you got into actual speaker design? Because I mean, it's clear to me that your
Yeah.
knowledge of how speakers work and the components of them is, um,
So
right there. So,
the Eminence DV77, Mick Thompson
yep,
signature
yep.
speaker, I designed. Our VM
Wow.
1265, I designed. Um, I had some assistance from some of the guys at Eminence based on, like, hey, is this part available? Can you do this? And then things that weren't available, we had to kind of alter to make it actually work properly. But as far as speaker design, I have a strong passion for it, and it's ever evolving. There's there's many. I mean, we have two cabs behind me right now that are full of all different prototypes and stuff. So
Yeah, and is that the kind of thing? So I mean, this is like it's not something that. Well, this is what I was going to say, right? One of the things that I think is quite unique about your approach is that you've approached the whole kind of all the components that make up the tonal elements in the amplifier from the speaker and cabinet and kind of gone up from there. Whereas someone like myself, I've gone straight into the kind of amplifier design and kind of work down from there. So it's just coming at it from a different perspective, but clearly
yeah,
a very important one.
it's I can't say that it's better or worse to do it the way that we did it. We definitely tested with other manufacturers' cabs, some of the staples out there, the ones that are,
Yeah,
you find
yeah,
most
yeah,
in
yeah,
studios. We
yeah.
we had to make sure that our amps played nice with everything. But of course, we knew what we wanted. We knew the sound that we were trying to achieve. So our cabs kind of were the basis that we, voiced everything on. We wanted to make sure they actually play well with different speakers too. And excuse me, and I'm sure some amps love certain speakers, some amps
Yes.
hate certain speakers.
Yep.
And that's why we've over the years we've tried to load all of our stuff with speakers that we find blend the best with our amplifiers.
Yeah, it is it's a question I get a lot. You know, like what speakers is your amp designed for, or it might be rephrased as um, what speakers do you prefer with your amp? That kind
Yeah.
of thing, right? So yeah, so I think it's right. Do you have like a do you have a single cab, like a particular one that's used as the golden reference, and then you test with others as well? Like
Yeah, so we still have one of our original designs, which I'll go into a little bit later, that we use here. And then we have the most recent design that I just finished up a few months ago that we're actually shipping those cabs off now. Um, it's it's kind of our golden reference that I listen to because I listen to it so many times every time we're testing an amp.
yeah,
I'm sure just like
yeah,
you
yeah,
have your riffs that you play that everybody's like, stop playing that, play something different. But yeah, we have a golden reference that we use. We do
yeah,
try different speakers in it often to make sure that everything plays nice with it. But we also make impulse responses of every single thing that we do, and then we listen to it critically with our plugin and listen to it with recordings, so we can actually hear what works and what doesn't, because a lot of times somebody can build something that may sound good in a room, but under a microphone, it reveals a lot of deficiencies.
yeah. Man, that's fascinating. And I do want to ask you about that digital stuff shortly, right? Because
Yeah.
that's something you've clearly pushed into, which I find really really interesting. Man, one of the things that's always struck me about your stuff is that it looks different, like
Yeah.
visually, but like I don't mean different bad, I mean different good, right? It's so
Yeah.
hard, you know, because I'm more of a kind of technical kind of engineering type brain, and I find that kind of the artistic side of it more challenging, if you like, right? You know, and
Yeah.
there is that part of it of what we do. And your stuff has a unique look to it, which looks industrial and cool, but different. Was that a happy accident, or did you work really hard at the look?
No, I have OCD when it comes to that kind of stuff. I actually went to college for art and industrial design engineering,
Wow, there you go.
and that's all through my younger years, I drew. I was always really into art, and I'm obsessed with cars and intricate engineering like watches. I absolutely love, and architecture. And the very mechanical and industrial side of things that we've really adopted over the past few years is something I've always wanted to do. It's something I've always wanted to see. It's ever evolving unfortunately. And I know some of my guys here, they try to get me tell me just like, stop designing, just let's leave it
Oh,
as it is. But
yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah,
it's I guess I have ADD when it comes to that aspect of it. But um no, I mean, as far as the aesthetics, I'm a firm believer that somebody buys a guitar for a reason, not just the way it sounds, because of the way it looks. They want it
yeah.
to
They
look
do.
incredible.
Yeah, 100%.
And I was always of the mindset, why not speaker cabs? Why not the amplifier themselves? And early on, we adopted a very custom shop motto with our products. And it was amazing, but it also was kind of a nightmare because it was pretty much anything goes.
Yeah,
And
yep.
we had to, we've been slowly cutting the options down and basically saying, this is what we offer. Just because
It's hard, man.
ugh,
Yeah,
it's, and I apologize to anybody out there that it took longer for your custom stuff. That's the issue. When you're doing things that are the same nonstop, it's a lot easier to get things done faster. When you
oh
have to
yeah,
constantly change things over, change paint or change color, especially when we used to do everything that was stain. We had to get the highest grade plywood and verify that every piece was perfect, and then the staining process was kind of different. But as of the past couple of years, moving over to Tolex and then standardizing the aesthetics, and I think it's really finally given us the uh, kind of given us our image.
yeah. It's a hard thing, isn't it? Because you want to. I mean, from a supply chain perspective, you want to have everything that you need kind of handy and in stock. So therefore, pre-ordered.
Yeah,
And the more you standardize, the more you can buy in bulk. So
exactly.
it's a no-brainer to kind of end up there. So from an amp perspective, the Granifier was the first.
So the Granifier was actually the first design that Eric and I did. Eric Hockenberry is actually our lead amplifier engineer. He's been with us since like 2014 or 15. So the Granifier was our first design. The Obsidian came about because we were like, well, this Granifier is only a single channel. Nobody wants a single channel amp. Everybody wants multiple channels. So that's where we actually released the Obsidian first. The designs actually aren't drastically different. They do have some major differences after the tone stack and then into the power supply, into the phase inverter, into the transformers, etc. And the fact that the Obsidian is PCB versus Granifier hand wired at the moment. Yeah, the Obsidian was the first one that we came out with in 2016. And then the Granifier came out in 2017 after I did a post on Facebook and asked if people want a single channel, and the it was kind of overwhelming. So we were like, all right, let's do
People do, right? I mean, this is the thing. Yeah, they do. Yeah, I mean, it gives me inspiration for when I think about what I want to do in 2024 and so on. Like I like I started with the most complex amp I could.
I was just going to say, you started off a little complicated there with the Alta. So many switches, so many knobs.
Well, it's three. It's only a three. I mean, there are 4-channel amps out there. It's only 3 channel.
Oh no, yeah. I know that. I know there's more switches, Kyle.
100%.
Yeah. No, but it's kind of, and that kind of leads into the ideology that we have in regards to our amps, that we prefer a little bit more simple. And there's no right answer. You know, having insane versatility is amazing, but we've always been a little bit more of, you know, a simple style. Just dial your tone in there. There you go. And you know, Ed Van Halen, he only ever used one channel.
Oh, dude,
hold the volume back.
This is it, man. So. How good. Right. I've been listening to that. You know, there's that stuff that's come out of with all that kind of isolated tracks and outtakes and all the rest of it. I was literally in the workshop yesterday with just that on in the background, and this is just like, you know, it's still, for me anyway, the tone, right? That is,
yeah.
I mean, it's playing helps, right? But,
absolutely. I mean, definitely helps.
It's still amazing. So, like, you said that, you know, kind of, I guess, voicely or tonally, the Obsidian and the Granifier have some shared DNA or similar. What's the kind of inspiration behind that? Like, where if you think about, you know, the kind of tones you were going for, the things that, you know, when you think of, everyone's got this sound in their head that they're seeking to reproduce. What's yours? What is that tone?
Honestly, both amps start off with a Soldano SLO as a basis. So the 39K cold clipper, you know, that kind of setup.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
And essentially what we were going for is when we started doing the amps, from being a guitar tech and touring, two of the most popular amps that people toured with in the genres of music that I was in, were the 5150 and the Dual Rec, both of which are heavily based on an SLO.
100%.
And we wanted something that was kind of in between, but also wanted a little bit more string definition than either of those provided. And kind of, we kind of evolved. We kept on thinking, okay, well, let's try this. Let's get a little bit more Marshall DNA. You know, let's try a little bit of this. So the Granifier especially is a total mutt. It's got some weird stuff going on. And it's kind of a very unique thing. It's versatile in what it can do, but it has its voice. It stays its voice all the time. So yeah, the inspirations honestly were kind of a modern tight sound, not overly tight, not overly bright, not overly fizzy, and something that kind of gave the clarity, you know, along the lines of like VHTs and Fryettes. They have a lot of string definition, and we definitely wanted that. So those were kind of the inspirations.
And that's super important for anything that's tuned down low too, right? Because you start to lose very easy to lose the note definition in a detuned guitar.
Absolutely. And we also, you know, when it comes to definition, it depends on the person that's playing. It depends on the tuning. It depends on the guitar. But some setups like a more compressed amp. Some setups like a little bit more open amp. Some like more dry. Some like more saturated. And we tried to find kind of a middle ground. I think we did a pretty good job at it. where you can still use an overdrive with the amps and it doesn't get so overly compressed and saturated. But for some players that have a very tight right hand, and if they have the right guitar and pickup setup, that they don't need an overdrive. That's all
Yeah.
subjective though as well.
Yep. Yep. And I will ask you about how Mick has them set up, right, when we get to that part of the chat, because that'd be cool to kind of go down that rabbit hole. Man, before we came on, we were talking a little bit about business, and you were saying you were super busy, right? Which is awesome. I'm keen to get your thoughts on the whole kind of direct sales model versus retail, and that's a question that I'm asking kind of selfishly as well, right? Because I'm navigating that myself, and so how have you kind of you found pros and cons of those two models, and can you make them coexist successfully?
And that's actually what we're trying to do right now. So we actually are, for the first time ever, actually we're distributing through a store, but it was a small batch with Nick Yaffe from the Axe Palace. And we're finishing up the batch right now. We're actually shipping amps out tomorrow and early next week. Over the years, we've had numerous people approach us, numerous different small stores. Guitar Center approached us a couple of years back, and that was partly with Musician's Friend as well. And I think they thought that we were huge and much bigger than we are. I see a necessity for it, but I also see downsides to it. There's really no right answer. Going direct to the consumer allows the products to be really, the quality control can be, outstanding. The price point can be a little bit better. And the interaction with the customer is there. So you have a better basis for a relationship with the end user. The downfall is when you're only selling direct, you don't have an outlet for people to go try your stuff out.
Yeah.
You also don't have an outlet for selling huge orders to, which, sometimes those really big orders can help really fund the next project or fund your business to get to the next level. So I think it's a good thing, but I think it's a bad thing. I think it's a balance of finding smaller mom and pop shops that understand that margins are going to be a little bit smaller than, say, something from Marshall or Vox or anything that's made overseas. And have that item, because it's kind of specialized, because it's boutique, be kind of a showcase product in their store, gets people in there because they can't play it anywhere else, and use that as a basis for marketing. So like I said, I think I see benefits and downsides to it. And this is our first foray into it, and we'll see how it goes.
And do you think you can sustain both, like a direct model and a retail model?
I think you can, but the only way that we're going to do it is kind of a direction that I discussed with Nick, where instead of offering the exact same product for both avenues, because then you're going to have competition. It's, why is somebody going to buy from this shop when they can buy direct through us, and or vice versa if it's the exact same product. So what we're doing is, with Nick, his were specialized. They have 2 additional features that the standard production Grandifier does not have. One being a 3-way voice switch, and then a different bright switch for the gain control. So plus a very unique colorway. His is black with purple accents, purple font and everything. So an ash front panel. It's pretty cool. So the way that I actually be able to see it working is exactly that, having specialized items that are exclusive to those stores, whether it be a unique amplifier or cab design, unique speaker, or something that was, aesthetically different. And there's a lot of companies that actually do that, especially with guitars. But that's the way that we actually see it being able to be kind of a viable option that works.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And I've asked that question to a bunch of different people, including more kind of higher volume, almost consumer based products, as well as much more kind of boutique stuff like what we're doing. And it's interesting because the answer is not always the same, right? And so some of the advice I've had is much more around you can keep it consistent and have the same product line as long as there's an agreement between your direct channel and any retail store that it's the same to the dollar. You can't
Oh
have
yeah, it
any.
has to be the same price, 100%. There's no
Yeah,
this retail stores or the whatever stores, whether it be online or a brick and mortar, they can't discount. Everything has to be the same price lock, just like what Mesa Boogie used to do. They used to price lock everything, so there's no competition between stores. It would
yeah,
be no competition between the manufacturer and the distributor.
yeah, exactly. But I think there's value in what you described though, which is that having something that is only available in a particular store,
Yeah,
or it's only available maybe on the direct channel, whereas the stores
yeah.
have the standard product, right? So it's something I need to pursue further.
Yeah.
I do have amps in stores here in Australia,
Hmm.
and not because not look, it's not because I'm expecting to sell many through retail. It's more that you need to have a place, as you said, right, where people can go and try it.
Exactly.
Um, but I don't have anything in a store in the States yet, and
Yeah.
I'm starting to get a lot of
And
requests for it.
And honestly, one other thing that we've been thinking of was instead of having, the stores is, numerous products in there and numerous batches. We've had some stores reach out to us and essentially almost in a consignment way where they want to have an amp in house
Yeah, yeah.
and we send the product direct to the customer. They can actually order through us with custom options, etc. It's just a hub where they can play it. They get incentive. They never have to actually put any money down. They just basically get an incentive, get a percentage
Ah,
by having somebody come in and order through the store because they tried it, they like it, etc. So I don't know how it's going to work. It's
that sounds cool. So that's
it's a
almost like
theory.
a referral fee, so to speak,
Yeah,
rather
pretty
than
much. Yeah,
so the guy that goes in and plays that amp doesn't take it home. It's a it's a demo amp if you like, and then if they
exactly.
want to go ahead, they order directly from you. That's cool.
Correct. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
um it's a model that I could see working, but we really, really have to we're trying to focus on getting lead times down considerably. And I'm sure you know how it is. There's, even though COVID 2020 is gone, there's still issues with getting some components. Some components have been discontinued, so we have to try out new components, circuit modifications, et cetera, to make sure that everything sounds the way we want it to. And most companies, from transformers to chassis to even the plywood for the head shells, the prices have gone through the roof, and the timing for getting anything is way longer than it used to be.
yeah,
It's no longer, 4 weeks to get an order of 50 sets of transformers. It's now, 12 to 16 weeks. And sometimes, a lot of things happen and it's easy for things to get behind. So once we actually start catching up on orders, which we plan to do next year, that is something that we do want to kind of try out, and I'll let you know how it goes.
yeah.
Could be a total failure. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I do. It's interesting, and I've had. I mean, I've actually got Charles Cillier, who's a boutique guitar builder up in Sydney. Has an alta up there in his studio for that purpose. Basically,
Oh, nice.
it's not an amp that someone would necessarily buy, but he gets a lot of pro players through that facility, and it's like it's there for demonstration purposes, and if anyone wanted to kind of check it out, they could do that, and then would order directly from me. So, but we'll see how
Yeah,
that goes.
luckily we have quite a few amps in studios, and a lot of people that play them touring. So that's definitely helped. And
Yeah,
plus our plugin has definitely helped as well.
yeah.
I think
I'm
I've
going to
got
ask
our
you. I'm going to
yeah.
ask you about that next. I'm just going to go to this. We've got a super chat, which is where
Uh-huh.
someone's thrown us $5 to get a question answered, which I appreciate because it helps pay for the StreamYard bill. So I'm going to
Yes,
go to this
Mr.
man,
Woodchuck.
and then we'll come back. We'll come back to the discussion about the neural DSP thing. So
Yeah.
Mr. Woodchuck for $5, thank you, brother, says, "Hey Mike, big fan of Amiga. Just ordered one of your 4x12 cabs this week with V30s,
Thank you
DV77s.
so much.
Do you have any plans to create IRs from your cabs?"
We actually do, and I want to apologize to everybody because we've been saying that they were going to be coming for quite a while now, and we actually have our setup that we've tested different interfaces. Our ISO booth has changed numerous times. We've tried so many different preamps and EQs and ways of doing it, and we have the method down. We are really happy with the way they sound, and other people are very happy with the way they sound. We will be releasing them very soon. It's going to be at the beginning of the year, so you know, we're going to be putting a lot of information up. So yes, beginning of the year, promise, promise, promise.
Well, you heard it here first, guys. So that's cool. Hey, man. So that's a really good segue into the whole kind of digital realm.
Yeah,
And I got a few questions about this, man, if you don't mind. One is the whole. Let's start with the neural DSP thing.
yeah,
Who are clearly a company that's smashing it in that world. And I've
yes,
got,
very much so.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
I'm a big fan of what they're doing. Got a quad cortex down on the ground right there.
yeah.
So how did that come about, and how's it has it assisted amp sales, or do you think it's got in the way of amp sales?
So, no, it's so the way it came about is we met the guys when we were at NAM in 20, I think it was 2017 or 2018. And they were just announcing the different stuff with Fortin and just kind of we were
Yeah,
just intrigued by it.
yeah,
And they came over and they were playing the amp and they were loving it. And we were, you know, little tiny company and we were excited that we had the line out of our booth that it did. And they approached us and said, "Hey, you know, you want to do a plugin?" And I was like, "How much do I have to pay first?" And basically, it was just essentially we got to talking, and I said, "Absolutely, I think it would be an amazing idea." We didn't know how well it would do, and it was released 2019, I
yep.
think.
Okay.
2019, yeah, Valentine's Day or 2020, I can't remember. Um, and it's been a huge success for us, honestly. I think it's been a success because it's given people, especially from other countries or people that don't have the money to buy a high dollar boutique product, the ability to actually play the amps. And I definitely think it's helped sales out quite a bit too, because again, it's kind of like it's a trial for people. They'd be like, "Oh, okay,
Yeah,
this is what the amp sounds like."
yep.
Um, the guys from Neural are amazing at what they do. Is the plugin exactly what the amp sounds like? I think there's some differences. Um, the actual amp is a little bit tighter than what the plugin is, but there's a lot of aspects that go and are involved with that. Uh, so
Do they model?
it's
Do they model it based on the amp? Like, as in, do they
oh
receive an
yeah,
amp, or do they look at the
yeah.
schematic?
So
Like,
we sent them an amp.
yeah.
They need the schematic. They deconstruct it.
Wow.
They're doing measurements everywhere.
Yep.
There are some other companies that just do impulses or that do similar things to captures.
Like a
Uh,
tone match kind of thing or whatever. But
yeah, kind of, yeah. And I'm not taking anything away from those companies, but a lot of times those never actually really get the same character as the real amplifier does. And I think some of these new companies, Nerlin, some of these other companies are the science behind it just it's a little too much for me.
yeah,
I'm
well,
less of a computer
it's
guy.
it's truly modeling, isn't it? Because
Yes.
I'd assume what they're doing is they're creating a digital model of each uh, stage, if you like,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
interstage networks as well, right?
Yeah.
Of your amplifier. It's yeah, it's, I mean, it's a science in its own right. That
Yeah, and, when they sent us the initial beta testing, what I was most surprised about was the actual response because it felt more like an amp than, other plugins that I had played and other, digital, products that I had played. It kind of had a touch response that just felt a little bit more natural.
I think that yeah, look, I on the whole kind of sales part of it, like, I think, if you didn't think too deeply about it, you might say, oh, it 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 probably stopped people buying amps. I don't think it. I don't. I mean, I agree with you. I don't think it would. I think that the person that is only going to buy the plugin and nothing else, then that's fine. At
100%.
least, now that's available, right? So
Yeah.
they can get they can get the experience without having to outlay,
Oh,
or maybe
yeah, a
they
lot
just, their
more money.
situation, yeah, maybe their situation doesn't facilitate a full, they don't have the room or the whatever where they are in their
Yeah.
stage of their life.
And I
Um,
think you're very right with that in the fact that, there are people that prefer to have both, especially studio guys, especially touring musicians, especially people that just play local, shows, and they don't want to use digital rigs. A lot of the time people are using the plugins for recording, and then they're using a rail amp for live
yeah,
use, or
yep,
you can do either, you can do vice versa. I don't really think it's taken away from sales. And I think it's done nothing but actually kind of help us out. Because, like I said, there's people in other countries that, buy our plugin. We get to see, we have an idea of all the different locations, especially with people that tag us on social media. And it's insane how many people from Asia or South America, numerous people in Central Africa and South Africa. Well, South Africa is a little bit more populated, but there's so many different places that we see people tagging us. And it's like, it's amazing that people around the world know who we are when we're a tiny company, tiny. So it's humbling, and we're very grateful for to being able to give them that opportunity.
yeah, man, that's awesome. And, that you remind me of something that was talked about when Kyle Rhodes was on the stream here a couple of weeks ago. And we talked about, and I know you know Kyle well, right? And we talked
Oh
a bit
yeah.
about, yeah, we talked a bit about how in this domain, it's a very emotional buy.
Hmm.
Like we're in a world where the people that are buying our products, they care deeply about this stuff. It's not we're not just selling consumables or whatever, right? What I mean? Like it's a very passionate, emotional buy. And the reason that we kind of had a bit of discussion about that is because we were talking about it's a bit of a emotional sell as well, right? Because you put your heart and soul into your products.
Yes.
And we were talking a bit about that kind of feeling you get when you see one of your amps up for sale secondhand.
Yeah.
Like, oh
Yeah.
my god, what? How, what if
Yeah.
it's it's a very emotional kind of
Yeah.
it's an
It's like,
emotional
why?
market. Yeah,
I've had to kind of separate myself from that, but and I'm sure some people are on it from these groups, but there's some Facebook groups that
yeah,
these,
yeah, yeah.
it's people love to buy and sell. There's
Yes,
a, you kind of get a high when you're spending that kind of money and it's a new thing, regardless if somebody loves it or they hate it. There's some people that love that ever revolving door of just trying new things out. And I've come, I'm okay with it at this point, because it's going to go into the hands of somebody else. And if it takes two hands before somebody, plays it and they're like, oh my God, this is my forever amp, I'm okay with that. It did at first seem like, you know, somebody was letting, taking your child and be like, yeah, we're going to give it to
it's
somebody
it's
else,
like it's like someone says something bad about one of your kids or something. Like what?
Exactly. So, no, but it's just, it's inevitable. I mean, people can say that it's the best piece of gear they've ever played, no matter what it is, from pickups to guitar to pedals to amps, cabs, or whatever. And people's, taste change over time, or they may find something that actually works better for them. So, we never pretend that what we build is the end all be all best thing ever, because there is no best.
Yeah,
I've said it
yeah.
before, our products are no better than a Crate GX15, little practice amp. It's all subjective. It's all what people want to hear.
You're dead right about the forever amp thing, right? And I've noticed that not just with my stuff, but like anything in that, let's call it the kind of more boutique world, that they do that stuff, particularly if it's kind of pricey, more at the kind of boutique end of the market. That um, it is a big investment for some people to hold on to,
Yeah.
and but they want to have their experience with it, and then it'll move on. And I think at the end of the day, it's all good, right? Because it means there's more people who've had the experience, and
Yeah.
if the amp's good or the guitar's good or whatever it is that you're selling, then that reputation will just build. That people have tried it and they liked it. They just
Yeah.
happen to move it on. That's all. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah. I mean, there definitely are some people that have take advantage of the situation for lead times and sold the amps for five, six, seven hundred
Oh yeah,
dollars, even $1,000 more than what they cost new. We don't condone that at all. I don't really. I don't really care for that, but you know, I understand supply and demand. So
Yeah, there's definitely that happens. Can we talk a bit about the association with Mick, right, and
yeah,
how that happened, right, and that kind of that whole world of Slipknot, which I said earlier that I had a very fleeting experience with, when yourself and Bob hosted me there for a couple of days, which was awesome. How did
yeah.
the how did the thing happen with Mick? How did you meet him and
So
hook up?
I had been guitar teching for numerous bands over the years, and I had, you know, taken numerous time off, and I kind of pick and chose my gigs over the years. And a mutual or a friend of mine um, had his wife is Mick's wife's twin sister.
Oh wow.
And between that and then V Man, who I had known V Man beforehand, V Man's the bass player for people that don't know. I'd known him beforehand. He had bought a couple of 1x12 cabs from us and loved him and told Mick about them. And between those two things, I got to meet Mick in person. We hit it off pretty well. Talked super nerdy gear stuff for hours, made everybody on the bus really bored and annoyed. And we started a relationship. And then he ordered some stuff from us, some cabs, to 1x12s. And because he wanted a kind of like a small, just home practice rig, and absolutely fell in love with them. And basically, we got to talking a lot about different things about gear. And I knew that they were going to be coming up in torn again. And he knew that I was a guitar tech. And he said, basically asked me if I wanted to come out with him.
Wow.
So
And how long ago was that?
that
Like,
was that was 2018. So 2018, it really was more so going into the studio. So
okay.
um mid 2018 is when we kind of discussed it and we finalized the details of me being his tech and going to the studio and stuff. And I think it was either September or October of 2018 when I went out to the studio when they were recording We Are Not Your Kind. So that was kind of my beginning with them. So it was met in 2016 or 2017 and then started working and together in 2018.
Where did they record that?
East West. East West is insane. So long story with that one. That place is pretty awesome.
Go
It's been a
for it.
brothel. It's been an underground casino. It's been
Wow.
a grocery store. It was owned by the manager of Frank Sinatra for a while. It's where Michael Jackson recorded Thriller.
Wow.
The Rolling Stones did that. Red Hot Chili Peppers, Green Day. I mean, you name it. Everybody's pretty much been there. It's a magical place. Absolutely amazing. And the people that work there are freaking awesome too.
That's amazing, man.
Yeah.
What when you started working with Mick, what was in his rig at the time? What was he playing amp wise?
So right when, well, I mean, actually, uh, before he was with us, he was playing Rivera 4x12s and the Mesa JP2C.
Okay.
And he had started the JP2C because he had his signature amp through Rivera, the KR7.
Oh yeah.
And
Yep.
he switched over to the Mesa in 20. Oh man, I'm not going to really say definitively, but it was like 2015, I believe 2016. Could have been later than that. Um, but when I first started working with Mick, I brought along the Obsidian because a lot of people know, a lot of people don't know. The Obsidian is actually his unofficial signature amp because when I sent a prototype amp to him, what became the Grantifier, he gave us pointers on like, oh, it'd be awesome if you had this. It'd be really cool if you had this. You definitely need to have MIDI. You should have multiple channels. And a lot of his ideas actually came to be in the Obsidian. And that's as soon as we started working together, when I went to the studio, he brought along the number one Obsidian that we built. That is the prototype, and the number one Grantifier, which at the time was called the Iridium, that he owns as well. And that's what he tracked the We Are Not Your Kind with, as well as the last album. So
That's cool. So that the when I when I went backstage with you earlier in the year, there were 2 Obsidians in mix racks.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, so they've been in there since that time, pretty much. The same amps?
Same amps and even the same tubes. They test fine.
Oh, really? Yeah. Wow, that's so cool. Man, you actually, I haven't told many people this, but you gave me an opportunity to actually play through it.
Yeah.
When I was there, so you just handed me one of his guitars, and it was an incredible experience. The thing that I remember about it was that it was loud, right? So they were playing like it was in the cabinet was in an ISO box, right, or whatever.
No, when you came out, that cab was actually in the set cart. We had taken them out of the ISO cabs because they were a little too small for them. Because a 4x12 in an ISO cab, that's a big road case.
Yeah.
But we had actually set them out in the set cart, and it was just open, facing to the front of the stage, which the guys can't hear when they're playing live, but it gets pretty loud backstage.
Well, because there was another band while we were there just hanging out backstage. It's because it was a festival setup, guys, right? So it's just band after band after band, and Slipknot were headlining. There was another band on the stage in front. I can't remember who it was. It was probably 2 or 3 bands before Slipknot came on. And then we were playing, and obviously, I mean, the on-stage sound or levels from that band were loud enough that they couldn't hear what we were doing. But I could hear and feel it actually, because the cab was pretty close to your station, right? I remember it was just kind of right there. So I remember that, and I remember it being quite loud, and I could kind of I could basically feel it. But it just felt so nice to play. It's the immediate kind of feeling that I got, from this. Like it wasn't a chore or challenging. It felt kind of a bit greasy, but in a good way. I don't mean like, it was super.
I know your term for greasy.
Yeah. It was like, and I mean, it was, and you'd set up those guitar. Well, the guitar that you handed me was a Jackson, I think, at that point.
It would have been a Jackson at the time with his prototype Fishman's. And I can't remember if it was the green guitar or if it was one of the red or black.
Kind of the bluey one. Does that ring a bell?
That would have been. It would have been green. It was Philadelphia Eagles green.
Yeah. Right. Oh, okay. Yeah. Maybe it was. I can't remember. Because it was kind of like there was so much going on. I was trying to take it all at the same time. So what else is in the in-mix kind of basic setup? Because you did take me through the rig, but I can't kind of remember what the ins and outs of it.
It seems like it's a crazy complex rig, and to anybody that's not used to, touring rigs that are, all analog, it is kind of crazy. So we have 2 Obsidians. There's just one as a backup, just in case. Luckily, we've never needed it. There is a KHE switcher that goes between the 2, or radials in one of the rigs, because we have 2 identical rigs. So signal chain is pretty easy. It's guitar into Shure Axient wireless into the Peterson rack strobe tuner into a JX44. The JX44 is a distribution setup, so we can actually switch between different wireless packs, because the wireless system that we're using is a 4-channel. So the JX44 allows you to switch between different outputs if you want to, and different inputs. From there,
would you have packs? Do you have like wireless packs on many guitars?
Every guitar, every guitar has its own wireless pack, and we have 4 channels total. So some of them share, but we just have to make sure that everyone has a pack. From there goes on to a Dunlop Crybaby rack wall from their custom shop. Then it goes into the RJM amp gizmo or effects gizmo. I'm sorry, which we have 2 rack drawers full of effects, and we have their Mastermind GT24, which is that giant space station MIDI board that you saw. I actually do all of the patch changes for Mick.
Yeah.
So it's switching all the effects in and out.
I remember you showed me Jim's rig at the time. He had the same.
Yep.
The same controller, right? The same.
Yep.
GT, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, the RJM Mastermind GT24.
Yeah.
So from there, we have some different fuzz pedals, some different basically effects pedals. His trusty Boss GX700 rack units that are the only way that we can achieve the sounds from the first album for Surfacing, Eyeless, Spit It Out, and many others. It's a crazy old mid 80s terrible thing that is finicky and then basically goes to the Obsidian. The only thing going in the effects loop of the Obsidian right now is just a reverb and delay pedal for if we play snuff, but everything else goes in the front, including the GX700. And for some patches that we're using on the GX700 for Spit It Out, prosthetics, and surfacing, it basically goes over to the clean channel and adds the GX700's amp distortion, like a 5150 or just like a Boss turbo distortion sound, because they're terrible. It sounds awful in a great way.
Yeah. I was gonna
Yeah.
ask you that. So you've got to, like, when you're starting to put stuff in front of the amp, you will actually channel switch to
So
clean on the Obsidian at the same time.
well, since the Obsidian is MIDI controlled and we have everything on a distribution network from a MIDI Solutions T8, I can hit one patch and it changes the channel of the amp and turns on the effect or goes to the correct patch on the GX700 for that desired effect. And in some cases turns on pedals or the effects loop, it all just with one punch.
That's super cool. And in terms of feeding front of house, are you miking that cab that's there, or is it you going through? There's no IRs and all that kind of stuff.
So we're going to be introducing IRs in the future. Again, we did it for a while, but yeah, it's live. So we're using the Omega 4x12 loaded with all DV77s. And are mic'd up currently with a Biodynamic 201, which has been a mainstay. Those mics are insane. If you don't have one, get one. It's like everything that you want an SM57 to be, while still having a different voice. That we usually have a ribbon, something like an SE VR2 or a Biodynamic M160, and then we usually have a condenser like a KM184 or the SE RN17. Etc. So we usually have 3 mics going to a Bob. So
that's cool. I've got a super chat here I'm gonna go to, and then we'll come back. So I've got a few more things to ask you about with Mick's setup. Tim Connors, thanks Tim, appreciate it, man. My Granifier will surely not be up for sale secondhand, so
thanks,
that's
Tim.
cool. Yeah, great amp. Tim goes on to say, Jason, I want one of your Evil Joe amps. Yeah, I'm still building them occasionally. Can or is Shay going to make these for the US guys? Yeah, so or are we paying $1K in freight? Okay, so Shay's not building for me anymore from scratch. So we did that first run of Altas back, this time last year it was. But we've got a new kind of setup going where I'm actually building the amps all the way up to a working amplifier, but then I just ship Shay the working chassis. So I pull the tubes out and ship just the chassis, which kind of minimizes the shipping cost. And Shay will then tube, check, bias, and mount in my US made head cabs, which are stored at his shop. I actually just shipped an amp, a custom built amp, to a guy in California. It was picked up 3 hours ago. And I'm telling you, it's not $1K in freight. Like, it's nothing like that. It's actually not. I've got a really fantastic deal in place with FedEx because I bring in and ship to the States so much that they've managed to kind of set me up with a pretty fantastic rates, which obviously I can pass on. It's not that much more than domestic shipping in the US. You'd be surprised. So just email me, man, and we can figure something out. You won't be paying $1K in freight, I tell you that. Okay. My next question. Just a little bit about the job of being a tech man in that world, right? What's the single most important priority either kind of, let's talk about it in terms of like before the show and then during the show. What's the number one thing that you're concerned about?
Before the show, make sure you don't have to go number 2.
Okay.
Now, um, you've
On
got
anything.
to
Yeah.
before the show, really making sure that all the guitars are ready, which sometimes can be pretty difficult, especially like we just did Mexico City and it was
Yeah. Yeah.
74 degrees during the day. And then during showtime, it was down in the 40s. So guitars don't like that change, especially when they're sitting outside the whole time. Verifying that everything is in tune, verifying that the intonation is good, the action is good, etc. And then before the show, also making sure that the rig is working flawlessly. And that being said, Bob is probably laughing right now because right when Mick was backstage, when they were about to go on, he had his guitar in his hand and he was just strumming. And I said, go ahead and tune again since you've been strumming. My entire rig shut down.
Oh, wow. No
Yeah,
way.
freaky, a little bit of freaky situation. So luckily, myself, Brad, Jim's Tech, and Dublin were able to get it back up and running, but it shut off immediately again. Kept on shutting off, and that was basically the distro power. So, long story short, making just sure that everything actually works properly, making sure that all the pedals are plugged in properly, that all the power supplies are nice and sturdy, that the MIDI pedal is on, etc. Just I have a full checklist that I do that I used to have written down in front of me, but now I do, mentally. So there's
How
quite a
many
few
hours?
things that have to be done.
Oh, I can imagine. How many hours before the show would you typically have to kind of, once everything's kind of set up,
Mhm.
and you've actually now got the opportunity to kind of start doing some of those, getting the guitars prepared, making sure the rig, as you say, right, is all kind of bulletproof. How much time do you have normally between when the
A
show
good amount of
actually?
time, a decent amount of time actually. So especially like headlining gigs and most festivals, um, our production team gets us loaded up on stage and very early, late morning most of the time, early afternoon.
Wow.
Since we headline and we usually don't go on until the earliest that we usually go on would be like 8:50 or 9 o'clock. We usually start setting up. Let's just say we set up at noon. The backline team usually can get everything going ready to sound check within less than a half an hour, 15 minutes. Um, right after the sound check is when we start, really working on the guitars, getting them all set up, yeah, doing all the string changes because we do string changes every single day.
On every
Um,
guitar.
every single guitar, yeah. I have a little bit easier than Jim than Brad does. Jim has a lot more guitars on
I know,
stage.
I did notice that. Jim's got like,
Yeah, so many. um, but yeah, we have a good amount of time to do it. We actually, we're pretty fortunate that we have time to go eat. We have time to kind of joke around a little bit, but we all really make sure that we get our work done. So usually it takes me about 4 hours for everything that's doing every single guitar, checking all the battery packs, making sure the wah pedals, are good, etc. So it's usually about four
okay,
hours.
yeah, okay. And then when the guys hit the, the show starts, right, and you're into it, I can imagine that an hour and a half or hour 45, whatever it is, just goes in the blink of an eye. But what are you? What's your main concern when the guys are actually playing?
So just like I have on right here, we wear in ears, so we get to hear, a different mix. Uh, we're not just trying to listen to the PA or anything from a distance. So what I'm focused on is making sure that the rig is working, making sure that everything is good, making sure there's no dropouts, and we have basically, I think you saw them. We have TV, we have monitors right in front of our rigs
Yeah.
because we can't. We're behind the stage. We can't see beyond that gigantic stage plot. Um, so we're watching behind the stage and just making sure that everything is good. If I see mix signal and go like this, for he points his guitars or something, I'll call over on a talkback mic to our monitor engineer Danny and say, hey, turn Mick down or turn him up or something else. Basically just really listening to make sure that the show is going smoothly for the person I work for.
Can Mick communicate directly with you through a? Can he in
No,
between?
Mick, we
Like,
used to have a mic on his side underneath the tower that clown stands on, the percussion tower, but he
yeah,
never really used it. He would just come back and say something. Jim, on
right.
the other hand, Jim has a mic. We call it the Jim joke mic. He likes to talk and tell jokes during the show. It's a good time. But they can't hear us. Like when he's talking into that, he can't hear anybody. And the only way that the band can actually communicate with us and actually hear us is if they communicate directly in person.
It's right. And so if Jim's at the mic there on the side of the stage,
Yeah.
which sounds like he does quite frequently,
Yeah, he
that's
does.
that's so awesome. That goes to the whole crew, like
That
like
it
Bob,
goes to
Funhouse,
yes.
you, like everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
He has supreme
So
power.
yeah, it's a good time. He likes to talk about insurance or switching his phone plan or just telling weird random jokes or just saying weird things or making noises. It's a good time.
Oh God. I guess yeah. That's cool, man. Hey, we've got a couple more super chats here, so I'm
Yeah.
gonna hit these, and then we'll make our way through some of the questions that have already been posted as well. Ethan, thanks, Ethan. Man, I appreciate this. Hey guys, loving this so far. Mike, how did you find out about Mick's switch to ESP? Were you involved in helping him make the switch? And also, do you know what model will be his signature, and when can we get one?
So I'm not going to go into, yes, I knew about the switch. I'm not going to really go into, you know, much more on that just for, to keep the peace with the previous company that he was with. Yes, yeah, I knew about the switch. I've actually personally been a huge ESP fan for years. I have numerous here at the shop, and it's been always my choice. And Mick actually has quite a few ESPs as well that he's got over the years, and he's always been a big fan of the brand. And the switch over is beneficial. Jackson is still an amazing company, but I definitely think, and he believes as well, that ESP is a better fit for him. As far as signature model, I'm working on the designs with Mick right now, and I can't tell you anything else about that. And as far as when can you get one, keep in mind that once we have the prototype and once we have all the specifications finished, it's not something that can happen within like a couple days. It's something that takes quite a long time because Mick will have a high-end signature, then he's also going to have a LTD signature. The LTD signatures, they have to, that's a much higher seller than the Japanese custom shop, whether it be an ESP original or an E2. So as far as a time frame, it's really hard to say. I wouldn't be the one to discuss with that once it's all complete, once prototyping is done. ESP will be the one that actually starts to announce that stuff.
Yeah, cool. Because man, that whole thing happened just after you guys left
when we went to
Australia.
Tokyo. Yeah.
You went straight to Japan after the 3 shows here.
Yeah.
And yeah.
It was in the works before that. A lot of
Yeah.
people think, oh, you just went to Japan and switched over. No,
But yeah.
It was in the works before that.
Yeah. Hey man, I actually got while we're talking about this, I've actually got some of this here. This is a product that you gave me.
Oh yeah, fret butter.
That
stuff is amazing. Big
if
shout out to
anyone's
those
not tried
guys.
this, give it a go.
Oh my god.
So
especially their guitar cleaner and their maple butter and their rabbit fur. The rabbit fur is their microfiber cloth.
Yeah, cool.
Honestly, it's the only stuff I use now. It's absolutely amazing.
Because I remember playing that, back to when you kind of handed the mixed guitar to me, and I kind of got to play through the rig. I was just like, oh my god, this thing is amazing. And I said to you, it's like, what? He said, I think it's like stainless frets, or what is it? It just, they felt incredible. And I remember you saying that. And then you can't buy this in Australia, but you can buy it in the US, obviously. And I managed to, I ordered a whole bunch, got it sent to Shay's house, and then he put it in a box and shipped it to me.
I'll hit up Jason from them and tell him to find a US or a Australian distributor.
100%. Yeah. It's the best kept secret in the industry, I think, that stuff. David says, David Sheldon Music, thank you for the super chat. Not a question, just
Oh,
wanted to
Dave
say
Sheldon.
you both
Miss
look
you, Dave. I'll see you
fantastic.
soon, buddy. I'll come up. I'll make it up there. Dave's a great guy.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's cool, man. So let me get to a few of these other questions, guys. And we're kind of now into the Q&A part kind of properly, right? So if anyone's got any questions they want to ask Mike, just jump them in the chat and we will get to them. First off, there was a question here from Jared about how to wire the heaters on 12AX7 with a 6.3 volt center tap transformer. And Alex, I think, has already answered that, right? So that is that is just the standard traditional way of wiring heaters, Jared. So there's a couple of references. One of the things that I suggest you have a look at if you haven't already, if you go to the Valvestorm website, on the homepage there's a link there, and it's called SDM Amp Info or something like that. And it's a link to a Google Drive where there's some really fantastic layouts of all the old Marshall amps, and it'll show you how all that stuff's wired up.
Rob Robinette, that his website is also great as well.
Rob Robinette's website is incredible.
Yes, I highly recommend anybody, working on amps to go check that out. And if you don't already, get the RCA handbook. It's it's old, it's in depth, but pretty nuts.
Yeah, well, I don't actually have that. I should get it. I've got the a couple of Merlin's books.
Oh, he's amazing.
Yeah, those are great.
Yeah.
There's the preamp design one, but there's the power amp supplies one as well, which is a fascinating book. And there's actually a lot in there about heater supplies and setup and so on. Ben says Psychosocial is one of the greatest metal masterpieces recorded. Yeah, it's called Down and Drop A, isn't it?
Yes, that's Drop A. Yep.
Yeah. Was an Omega amp used for mixed tone?
No, that was well before we were with him. That album came out, I think, in 2009, maybe earlier than that.
It's early, right?
Yeah, that was earlier. That was God, I can't remember what year that was. No, at that point, that song would have been his Rivera KR7 with a lot of Marshall JCM 800. He has a red JCM 800 that is, God, I can't remember, 1985 or 84.
50 or 100.
100. And it is something special. So that was 2008. All Hope Is Gone. Yeah, that amp, that JCM 800 that he has is definitely something special.
Man, I think I've seen photos of that amp. Would that be right?
I think so. They had videos. Rivera posted a video of him playing one of the songs from that album, and I think you can see it in the background.
That'll be it.
Yeah, he's had that one, and that's one of those. I mean, you know how it is. 800s are
some of them sound
amazing. Yeah. Some of them are, why does everybody like these? And his is one of the great ones.
It's true, man. There is a funny formula in there, right? I mean, I've built enough, amps based on that architecture now to kind of find my own formula for that. I think sounds awesome with that circuit. But man, they are, because I have a bunch of them through here for, either mod or restoration work, and some of them just sound incredible, and others are, as you say, why do people like these amps, right?
Yeah. There's some that I'll keep my opinion to that I just do not like. Some of the generations. But
this is it. And the second part of Ben's question is regarding, so a little bit like our conversation about neural DSP. Line 6. I mean,
I wouldn't have a problem with it. When companies do that, most of the time they're not actually labeled as the actual manufacturer's products. You'll see Mesa will be a tread plate, Friedman, I can't remember what it's called, Freeman or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah. And that really isn't something that I could contact them and choose. I have talked to somebody that is no longer at Line 6. They expressed interest, and there's some other companies that really want to add our stuff to their library, but that really isn't a decision for me. I think it would be awesome. it would benefit us from a standpoint the same way as the Neural DSP plugin, where it gives people an opportunity to play our product if they can't either afford the real product or if they are able to, to get their hands on one. But I think it would be cool if it'll happen. Not really sure.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because that whole thing about the not using the official name just says to me that they've modeled the amp, but they haven't done it in consultation or in partnership
No,
with
a
the
lot of people have
company.
problems with it. I see, I go both ways with that, where I
Yeah,
do see a problem with it because it is intellectual property,
yeah.
regardless of if the circuit is based off of another amplifier. It is changing it enough to the point where it is a unique voicing. But at the same time, you are taking somebody else's circuit and modifying it. So my
But
opinion on it is
everything is based on everything. I mean, but there's value in
exactly.
there's there's value in the brand, right? So circuit construction aside, someone who's taken a name like and called it Freeman rather than Friedman or
Yeah.
whatever, they're attaching that thing to a trademark or a brand, and I think it's I mean, I think it's better. I don't know. It's probably better. It's cool to have your stuff modeled digitally and available,
Yeah.
but it would be better if it was done officially, I would think, rather
I
than
do agree with that. The only downfall is if they do that, the end product is going to have to be considerably more expensive because they're going to have to pay license or an initial
yeah,
fee to the manufacturers. And that's what a lot of people don't realize is that while, our products are based off of somebody else's intellectual property, it's just like, making some kind of pie. Yeah, somebody else did it. I changed it in this way. If you try to sell this one that is my exact recipe with almost the exact same box, you're kind of stealing it from me. Um, so when it comes to, if somebody had actually used the name, they would have to pay the person. And again, in turn, it would raise the price of the product and it would raise the price up to the point where like you wouldn't have all these different options. You wouldn't be able to have so many different products in that library. So
yeah. And I think Ben goes on to ask, and I think we've touched on this, Ben, which is I wonder if Mike sees digital platforms as a threat to tube amps, or does he
um
see digital modelers boosting tube amp sales?
both ways, honestly. To
Yeah,
be honest, everything in this world is a gray area. There's no black or white. In some ways, I do see them as a threat, but I also see them as a pretty incredible piece of technology that I think needs to be embraced. I definitely think that tube amps and digital run a parallel path.
yeah,
There are people that are always going to be digital. There's people that are always going to be tube. There's going to be people that cross back and forth, and I'm totally okay with it. From a perspective of listening to it from a live performance, um, there have been times that I'll 100% admit I thought people were using real amps and they're actually using digital. Then there's other times that I've been like, "Ugh." You could tell that it was not, it could
not
have been the
optimal.
sound guy's fault. It could have been the user fault of just dialing in wrong. Um, I don't think that they're a major threat because there's a romance to analog tube amplifiers. They deliver something that I don't think digital would ever really be able to create. And that's not saying that digital doesn't sound good. It's because of the inefficiencies of a tube amp. I mean, you have essentially a 45-pound uh basically sucker of electricity that does
Yeah,
nothing else other than convert it into heat and passing
generates a lot of heat.
electrons. Yeah, and
It's a
passing
very
electrons
expensive
through.
heater.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
But there's something really good about that. I kind of give people the same reference from, let's say, an old muscle car to an electric car.
yeah,
Electric cars are going to be faster. They're going to be more efficient. They're going to be able to do the same thing, sometimes better than an old muscle car does. But muscle cars also give you kind of a different emotion. They give you a different feeling. It's a different, again, romance. And I use that term
yes,
because it is.
yep, yep,
Romance is, it's a huge thing. It's a feel thing. And because every amp is different, and even from the same brand, even the same model, every amp is different. Every bit of electricity is different. It is going to sound different at times, which is a bad thing because it can be more inconsistent than digital. But at the same time, that's all kind of the magic of it.
As part of it's organic, right?
Yes,
It's
100%.
it's part of the magic, and I think that I mean I'm a firm believer in a, a tube amp paired with a guitar. It's one thing. So like
Yes.
the amplifier is part of the instrument to me, and I'm sure I'm not. I know I'm not alone here, and with this point of view, right? Like, it's something that a player will connect with, and they will play the amplifier as much as they play their guitar. You know,
Yeah, absolutely.
super important. Speaking of sound guy's fault, I'm going to bring up this. This is
Uh,
Bob. This is Bob Strakel. So Bob does front of house sound for Slipknot and Avenged Sevenfold, and probably many others. And he actually texted me before we came on air and said, "Ask Mike about his white party pants." So
so
I'm gonna ask you about that, man.
I, quite a few years ago, I can't remember when it started. I had some white pants and I got really drunk and it started to become a thing where when I was going to party hard, I would start to wear some white pants. And
All
I had the
right.
same ones for a long time. They got to see him one time when it was actually my 40th birthday. We were in Copenhagen. So that was 2000, right before the pandemic and everything. And we went out to a place called War Pigs, which is an incredible barbecue spot. It's absolutely amazing. After that, I was already pretty gone. Not, didn't really know exactly what was going on. And I went back to the hotel, which is right next to a bar that Bubs, who is V-Man's tech, somehow talked to this person and they let us have the bar all night, no charge. They left. It was just like, oh, here you go. Just
What?
lock up before you leave. Yeah. So I changed into some white pants and things got a little out of control. There may or may not be videos of me dancing provocatively on a pole, dancing around karaoke and singing. I had my shirt off, I think, at
who
one
was
point.
there? Who was there, Mike? Mainly just the crew guys, or like?
Oh yeah, it was the crew guys, V-Man. Yeah, it was majority of the Slipknot crew. So we have a pretty big crew. Not everybody was there, but there was a good amount of people there. So there's a lot of witnesses, unfortunately, to that spectacle.
So everyone knows, man. If you rock up with the white pants on, it's going to be trouble that
Yeah,
night.
if they were, yeah, because I don't party, like I don't drink a whole lot. But when I do, no, I'm saying it's if I have white pants on, I'm ready to have some fun. So
That's good to know, man. I'm going to go to my next question here. Anthony. Hey,
oh,
man.
Anthony DeVito, yep.
Yeah, and Anthony's got an Obsidian. I know that because he's mentioned it to me before, which is super cool. Can you expand on the version 1.5 mods?
Yeah.
Um,
So basically what we wanted to do is we wanted to increase some of the tactile feel, some of the touch response, etc. So a lot of it is we changed around the way that the presence and resonance, will also called depth and detail in our amps. We change around that circuit. We change values pretty
okay.
drastically. We change the actual way it's wired. We also changed some of the coupling caps in the lead channel, changed the coupling caps and some of the other stuff in the clean, as well as the crunch. So um, there was actually numerous components. It's, I believe, 12 or 13 components that are changed within the amp, and it's not drastic, but it's enough to make a difference. The low end gets rid of a little bit of the sub lows that are kind of unusable with guitar amps
Yep.
and tightens things up, makes it a little bit more reactive to the feeling. The front end is a little bit tighter. The gain is reduced, but also increased in ways. We go to a smaller coupling cap for the lead channel, and when you do that, you are reducing gain a slight bit. And same thing with the cathode bypass cap. But changing out the bright cap on it to a different size also kind of almost makes it feel like it's more saturated. So it
Interesting.
increases the high frequency saturation a
Yeah.
little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, if you reduce the size of a coupling cap, particularly early in the circuit, it'll tighten up the amp, right? So you can
Yep.
you can extract more gain without it going into the world of being undefined, if you like.
Yeah, Wolfie and undefined and stuff. Which, I
Yeah,
mean, the Obsidian still has an obscene amount of gain on tap. I mean, you never really need to push it past, I would say, 1 o'clock at the absolute most.
yeah,
So
yeah. So is that the V1.5 mods? Is that something that existing owners can send the amp in and
yeah,
have it modded to
absolutely.
that
They
spec?
can send them to us. We basically, to save them money, if they still have the original box or another box, you guys can actually use our UPS account. So we'll send you a label. You just have to drop it off at a UPS facility. Uh, we get it. We usually do the mod within 2 days and ship the amp back to you. And basically, you just pay for the mod plus shipping. So it's fairly easy. And Jason, you're
Yeah,
going to be doing a couple in Australia.
yeah, yeah. Like, man, yeah, that would be super cool. So, how would if someone's in Australia and they own one of these amps, they could contact you, and then we could organize it from there. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, we actually have one gentleman. If he's on here, I apologize. We haven't got it sorted out. I'll get it sorted with Jason and we'll get it to you. And there's also 2 gentlemen in China. One guy has 3, the other
Oh
guy
wow.
has 2, and one guy in Japan. They all want to get them modded. And I said, your best bet is to send them to you because it's a lot shorter of a distance.
Well, yeah. Hey,
So
that would be super cool. And man, I actually shipped an Alta to a guy in China. Uh, this week. I reckon that I shipped it on Monday, and he received it yesterday. So it took 4 days from
yeah,
Melbourne to Beijing. Super quick. Like it takes longer to send an amp to Perth, which is like the other side of
same here.
Australia. That's like 5 or 6 days, right? This got to China in 4, like delivered to his door. So super easy. Um, uh, Alex says, yeah, don't forget to hit the like. Come on, guys. If you haven't already, do that. That'd be cool. Ryan says, oh, this is more of a comment, but I'll go through it. Mike did full backline for the band I was in a while back. We always got compliments on how amazing our tones were compared to the other band we played with. Seriously, some of the best cabs in the biz. Was that like, when you told the story about you first got into kind of techie and stuff? Was that with Ryan?
No, so basically, Ryan is one of our customers. He bought a full backline of cabs. So they bought 2 guitar cabs and a bass cab. And that's what they toured with. And they absolutely loved him. Yeah, his first cab was a 412 115. We had talked briefly before about some crazy configurations. So we've done 112, 212, 115, 112, 115, 312, 212, 115, 412, 512, 412, 115, 512, 115, 612, and an 8x12. And that doesn't include the bass cabs we've done that are also pretty crazy. In fact, if anybody's looking for some 8x12 guitar cabs, we have a local customer that has 2 that he wants to offload because he doesn't play out anymore.
How do you transport an 8x12, man? That's just
With another person. Now, they're actually not as big as you would think they would be. They're not tall. They're actually 40 inches wide by 46 inches tall with the casters, and they actually move around pretty easy. A couple bands actually use them. So Phil Anselmo and the Illegals. So Phil from Pantera and down. So every one of his side projects besides Pantera, they actually use 2 8x12s and 2 6x12 bass cabs. So they push a
that's
lot of air.
that's insane, man. That's so cool. We've got a question here from Mr. Woodchuck. Says, how do you find the offset of the speakers on the Omega cabs change the sound versus 4
So
speakers in a perfect square pattern?
So, Jason, I'm not sure if you know, but basically, when we first started, we really did. I spent a lot of time in acoustics, basically just trying different things out. And we're still going to offer those cabs, but we don't offer as much. So, the big difference with the offset speaker arrangement, it has a lot to do with phasing. So, when you actually have 4 speakers like this, you have a big dead center. So, what you have is you have phase cancellations because think of it like this. If
Yep.
you have 2 speaker cones with this sound and this sound come into one of your ears at the same time, they're going to be in different time signatures. When they're on the same plane, that's what you're going to experience problems with, is because you have that big dead spot. You have 4 speakers that are projecting sound at different time signatures based on the frequencies. So when you actually offset the speakers, that reduces it quite a bit. And what you get is, instead of a traditional 4x12 with 4 speakers in a square pattern, which everyone knows, when you sit in front of a 4x12, 5 feet away, and sit down in front of it, or 10 feet away, gets pretty nasty. It gets very laser,
Oh
beamed
yeah,
right
it
in your
can get
face.
really, really kind
Yeah.
of. Yeah.
So the projection of a standard 4x12 is pretty shallow, because from an acoustic standpoint, a 4x12 guitar cab, especially a slant, is one of the worst designs ever created for sound reinforcement. Luckily, it actually created a sound for guitar and everybody loves it, so it works. The offset pattern basically that we did shifts one speaker down, and then it matches right below it. So you have very
Ah,
minimal space that's dead in the center.
yep.
That increases projection drastically, because all the speakers actually start to work together. You have less of a phasing issue between the relationship of the speakers. Then internally, since you don't have 4 speakers sharing an exact same distance from the sides of the speakers, from the top and the corner, you actually start to diminish standing waves internally.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
with that design, you get a much better projection and a much better horizontal dispersion. Uh, Vertical dispersion is a little bit better, not drastic, but no cab really has a good vertical dispersion, because you're not going up and down when you're standing. Now, the reason that we're actually switching a lot of our new cabs to the more traditional pattern is because the sound, when you're recording, when you're also standing in front of it, from a close proximity, is oftentimes more desirable with that. The offset design, in my opinion, is superior for stage use when you're going to be 10, 15 feet away from your cab, or even 5, 10 feet away from your cab. You're actually going to hear the speaker cab far more. It's going to project further. It's going to be more natural in your ear. The more traditional design, in my opinion, actually works better from a closer standpoint, and also from a recording standpoint, which is
Yes.
why we're going to be offering both.
Okay. So when you say recording, like if you're close miking that speaker,
Mhm.
you'll get different results depending on.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this plays into the acoustics aspect of it, because when you look at our offset design, the speaker, so if this is the edge of the speaker cab, this speaker is actually a little bit closer to the top and to the side. So the reflections from those the sound waves bouncing off the walls plays a role in the way that the speaker is actually producing sound, because they're paper cones. The sound is actually going to come out in a different way. If you had the speaker farther away from both sides, you're actually going to be a little bit more bass heavy. So with our offset design, the one speaker is much farther away from the top and the side, where the other speaker right next to it, to the, and top of it a little bit, is closer. So what we did was, with our traditional design, we actually tried numerous different positions, and we came up with what we believe to be an optimized location for the distance between the sidewalls and the top and bottom of the cab, to give you the best balance and give you the best response. So it's not to say that our previous cabs sound bad in the studio, because they don't. Numerous bands have recorded with them and love it. We just feel that the response of the new design is a little bit better off for that aspect, which is why we're going to be offering both. We're going to be re-releasing the original design, the offset design, again in the near future, for bands that want to play live and have that sound really projected out front,
Yep.
or just want that sound that they got in the recording studio from somebody else's cab, that somebody else that used our stuff.
Yeah. And are the actual outer dimensions of the cab, is it
Are
different to
identical.
the design?
Nope,
They're identical.
they're identical. Yeah.
Okay.
So our cabs, the outer dimensions are 30 inches by 30 inches. So 30 inches wide, 30 inches tall. I don't know what that equates to in millimeters, because that would be like
I don't know
1,090,
either.
just
Something.
ridiculous numbers.
I've kind of got used, because of obvious reasons. I've actually kind of got used to working in inches, and
Imperial. Yeah.
I have, yeah, totally. And I did, like, when I actually really got into PCB design, I found that a lot of the kind of component footprints and so on that I was using were in mil, like a thousandth of an inch.
Oh yeah.
So I just went all into it, and so everything I do is all done in inches now, and mils.
It's dumb, but it also makes sense in a terrible way.
It's kind of, you kind of got used to it, but I'm forever doing a conversion between one and the other. But yeah, I can kind of I can do it now. I think Luke has got a question there. How did the Mick Thompson? I think we covered this one, Luke.
Yes.
Mike sure talked about that.
Yeah, he is still using all of our products live. He's using our cabs, he's using our amps, and possibly some other stuff in the future.
Yeah,
Some different stuff. Won't
sick.
go too much into detail on that.
You can show me the next time you come down to Australia.
Yeah.
Which I'm looking forward to whenever that happens.
Kel Hicks.
Cal Hicks, yeah. Yo, Mike. The 513 says hello. I'm not too sure what that means, but
It's our area code for phone. I'm originally from the same location that he is. So
okay. Could a cabinet be designed to cater to a plug-in plus power amp setup to get closer to the source tone, like a boutique fly rig?
This has been a topic that's been pretty difficult that we tried a couple years. Essentially, what you're looking for is a 4-inch flat response rig. FR rigs, in my opinion, never sound exactly or have the exact same response that a traditional guitar cab and amp
Agree.
will. There's companies that have come out with some really good ones. There's companies that have come out with some that were, I don't know exactly what they were going for. From my experience, one of the best options for using a digital rig, whether it be a plug-in and power amp or whatever, if you have something like an Axe or like a Helix that can actually just use the preamp and not use the power amp modeling, and you use either a tube power amp or a good quality solid state power amp and then run it through a traditional guitar cab, you're actually going to get a more realistic sound versus going with a full range flat response rig. Full range
Yep.
flat response rigs are also incredibly difficult to mic up because usually it is either a separate woofer with a tweeter or a horn,
Yep.
or it is a concentric design. And, you have the compression driver, tweeter, or horn in the center of the speaker, which, of course, at that point, you're not going to want to put a mic directly in the center, else it's just going to be total fizz city. Now, somebody else may have experienced something that I don't, and may have found something that works better. But we tried it for a couple of years, and we went way too deep into it, including crossovers and insanely high end drivers and compression drivers, and they worked great. They sounded good, but as soon as you compared it to a real cab, there was definite differences, and you could hear deficiencies of the FR design. So we abandoned it, and we prefer to just, stay a little bit more traditional at this point.
It's the way, man. And I think that whenever I think about, modelers and all of that, right? The whole tube versus modeler debate, which we've already, talked a little bit about on this chat. The biggest issue I think that still remains is this one, which is like, if you want to use a modeler, but actually have it up at stage volumes like you would have a guitar amp, this is an area that hasn't been. It's a problem that hasn't been solved yet. I've never heard or played a modeler up at stage volume like that sounded like a real amp. They do when you plug them into monitors and stuff, and maybe
Yes.
through a PA, yeah, absolutely. But when you want to have that, amp in the room kind of experience or whatever, it just doesn't work. And the thing that I've found also, and this is actually trying it myself, not just reading forums and stuff, as my own personal experience, is that when you use a modeler, particularly with an FR style monitor or cab or whatever, you get a massive variation in the tone when you bring the volume up.
Yeah.
Whereas you get that whole Fletcher Munson thing going on, right? Whereas with a guitar cab with a tube amp, it seems to just keep its kind of, the tonally it stays there, even if you crank it,
A lot of it has to do with the fact that you're using one driver versus two drivers. A dual driver setup, you're going to have inconsistencies when you actually look at a frequency plot of a 4-inch flat response.
Yeah.
There's going to be peaks and valleys. They try to compensate that with crossover networks, but tweeters and compression drivers are inherently far more efficient than a woofer is. The more volume you go, you can't compensate a passive crossover to account for different volumes that are not simply pink or white noise. So you get differences. When it comes to a guitar speaker, you have one cone that is acting as the entire frequency band. It's a transducer for the entire frequency band, even though it's for guitar speakers very shallow. It's usually 70 to 5,500 hertz is your peak. You do have other peaks beyond that that go up to 15K, but not much, nowhere near the actual nominal SPL rating. So guitar speakers are definitely going to be a little bit more accurate and maintain the same profile of sound through a varying degree of volume, as opposed to a dual driver unit that's trying to amplify that other rig. Now it gets different when you're talking about, high-end PA systems, but even PA systems, once you start turning the volume up, you have to change things around. It's not just, oh, you can turn the volume up without adjusting different parameters.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes a lot of sense, man. A question here from PF. Jason and Mike, suggestions on a 72 super reverb bias setting for long tube life and max headroom. Look, my advice here wouldn't be particular to any particular Fender amp or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think you need to bias too hot. I normally go in around somewhere between 60 to 65% dissipation, depending, and I think that will deliver. You'll get rid of crossover distortion at that point, but you don't need to run them too hot. I don't know, Mike, have you got any comments on this one?
Honestly, we try not to bias our tubes too hot to begin with, because once you actually start to bias really hot, you're actually going to start to get clipping from the tubes, and you're actually going to start to lose headroom. It's going to create a little bit more low end. It's going to take away from the chime and the top end. And honestly, we actually bias our amps fairly cold. Not as much as like not as cold as a 5150, but typically, we don't really do any pure clean amps. We don't have any Fender circuits, so that's going to act different than our amps. But typically for like a 6L6, we bias it 45 milliamps or millivolts per pair, which is pretty low.
Yeah.
You don't have to go excessive. A lot of people think that a higher bias is going to equal more tone, and it actually doesn't. Especially in modern high gain amps, you actually want to try and keep the power section as clean as possible, as opposed to something like a JMP, where it's, of course, you want to push that power section because that's where a lot of the distortion comes from. Modern amps, especially based on the SLO circuit, the Soldana circuit, you start to really push that into power amp distortion, and it is not pleasant.
Agree. Yeah, and I think any kind of modern master volume amp, all of the kind of distortion characteristics are coming from the preamp, right? So you just need that power amp to kind of.
But my recommendation for the reverb settings is, Leo Fender and his team were geniuses back in the day, because they pretty much created the platforms that everybody uses. I would go based on just what the actual specification is from the manufacturer.
Yeah, agree. The second part of this question, so Lyle, that's a reference to Lyle Coldwell from Psionic Audio. And I've mentioned this a bunch of times. Lyle has a really fantastic video on Marshall grounding. And I think the amp that he demonstrates the ground, it's kind of a Lowry style grounding. But I think Lyle does a fantastic job of explaining why it works rather than just show you how to do it. If anyone hasn't seen that video, check it out on Lyle's channel. My mods, I mentioned before about, playing around with an 800, either 2203 or 2204 circuit. And I think the two most, I'll just say, right, two simple things you can do to improve it if you're finding yours a bit undefined or whatever. Change the first coupling cap to a 2.2 nanofarad rather than the 22. As we said before in the chat, right, that'll tighten up. It'll knock some bass out of the preamp and kind of tighten the amp up. And then you can bring a little bit of kind of depth back into the amp just with a simple fixed resonance circuit or a fixed depth circuit off the negative feedback. I've shown this a bunch of times on my channel, right? So you can go and look it up. Those two mods, simplest things you'll ever do, they'll, I think subjectively anyway, will improve your 800 massively.
Absolutely. Fully agree.
Yeah. What else we got here, guys? Ben. Yeah, Ben says, we've talked about the 1.5 mods, Ben. So if you missed that, you can go back and have a listen to the stream on replay, and Mike goes. Yeah,
because the Grandifier, Ben actually he doesn't live too far from our shop.
All right.
He has a Grandifier, very similar thing. So it's going to tighten things up. It's going to make the touch response better. The notes kind of jump out more. Top end is a little bit sweeter, and it's It's got a little bit more snarl to it.
Yeah, cool. We've got some questions here about the mic that you mentioned, actually. So KXM Rock says, can you state the mic that is better than a
So
57?
it's not better. It's just a different thing. It's the Beyer Dynamic M201. It's a dynamic mic, very similar in size to the SM57. The biggest thing with the 201 is that it's a little bit sweeter and cleaner up in the top end. It doesn't have as much of that typical 57 kind of fizz, which is still, and I love the 57. It also has a little bit more bottom end to it. So it gives you the same response that a 57 does, but it's just a little bit more balanced. Also, check out the new Shure 545 that they just re-released. That thing's pretty awesome. It's based on a
Yeah,
57. It sounds a lot like a 57, but yeah, it's pretty awesome as well.
there you go.
Yep, there it is.
There it is there. So someone was listening carefully. That's cool. Jerry's asking, Mike, what guitars and pickups do you prefer with your amps? What do you guys use for testing at the shop?
So we have a lot of different guitars here with a lot of different pickup setups. My personal favorite, I'm more of a passive pickup guy. I've used EMGs over the years. I had a couple guitars with Mick's old Seymour Duncan's, his active ones that were pretty cool. Honestly, typically what we try to go for is we try to go for passive pickups that are not overly hot or high output. Some of my personal favorites are the DiMarzio deactivator, which a lot of people will be like, they'll immediately think like, wait a second, isn't that like a cheap knockoff of an active? No, it's actually a pretty incredible passive pickup. It's not too hot. It has a lot of the really cool characteristics that active pickups do, but without the overly compressed mid-range and low end. So the deactivator is a great bridge pickup. Another DiMarzio that we love is the Illuminator, which is a John Petrucci.
Oh, yeah.
The Crunch Lab, another John Petrucci signatures, pretty awesome. If you like, we test those a lot with our amps, as well as Wes Hauk, his signature Jupiter pickup from Seymour Duncan. Those things are awesome as well. Ethan Spalding from Instrumental has probably one of the best passive pickups out there, in my opinion. The Safety 3 and the Safety 4 are pretty incredible. Honestly, all the pickups from Dunnable, from Sasha, those things are absolutely amazing. Very clear, very transparent. But as far as guitars here, I mean, we have a lot with different Seymour Duncans, DiMarzios, EMGs, Fishmans, Lundgrens, bare knuckles, instrumentals. Yeah, I mean, we've pretty much got a ton of different ones.
Do you have a setup, like, do you have mixed setup, like from a guitar perspective?
Not at the moment. Not at the moment. I used to have one of his signature guitars with his pickups. But since we've changed everything now, I am going to be buying another ESP and getting some of his signature pickups to put in there. I have one of his prototype sets. I'm just waiting on them to get another couple sets built for us. So, because
Cool.
I mean, they're not fully released yet, but of course I'll get some before they get released. But we try to test out with numerous different tunings, different styles of guitars, and different pickups to make sure that they work well. Of course, some pickups work far better than others. And I'm actually going to be doing a blog. We're going to be releasing on a website for, my personal recommendations, which, it's all subjective, but it's pickups that I found kind of deliver the best for my, personal taste.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, people do want to know, right? Like in terms of, it's a bit like we were talking before about the reference cab.
Yeah.
So, a bunch of different speakers, a bunch of different cabs, but you kind of have one that you kind of know, like, well, this is my reference point. It's the same thing, isn't it?
My main reference guitar, honestly, is I have a 1998 ESP Horizon Custom that I had built way back in the day. It's bolt-on, it's maple neck, solid ash body, tunematic bridge, and that has been my go-to for reference since the beginning. That's actually loaded with the DiMarzio deactivator and a humbucker from hell, another DiMarzio that sounds like a single coil. It's not hot. I don't know why they call it that, but everybody that comes into the shop when they play it, they absolutely fall in love with the way it sounds. So, yeah, And honestly, just to elaborate a little bit, I highly recommend that everybody try out different picks, different string gauges, different pickup height, and different action height because that all has major, major roles in the way that a guitar and amp setup is actually going to sound.
Yeah,
Some pickups
100%.
have a very bad thud. Some strings sound more dead than others. If you don't have your pickup height, match properly for your setup, it's going to either be too hot or too, uh, you know, too soft in the lows or, too weak in the gain department. It's a balancing act. And to anybody that says like, "Oh, I got to try this amp out, but it wasn't my normal guitar. I didn't like the amp." You need to also try it out with the guitar you're familiar with because they all play huge roles in response and overall sound.
Yeah, 100%, man. Couldn't agree more. Lyle is in the chat, actually. Sonic Audio, I mentioned that. So he's saying, yeah, the M201 is more like a 57 on steroids.
Yeah.
Fantastic mic. Yeah.
Yep.
That's cool. Simon Hosford is here. Hey, Hoss. How are you, man? Quick observation. I'm sure there must be some amp builders that aren't super nice, but I'm yet to see you chat with one, Jay. I only have the good guys on here, man. No
There's not,
asshole.
I mean, honestly, in this industry, I've been pretty fortunate with, 95% of the people that I meet are actually pretty awesome. A lot of people think that it's going to be cutthroat and that, people are going to down talk other builders. But honestly, from my experience, I've met so many people like Reinhold Bogner is awesome guy. Jason, of course, he's debatable. No, everybody's, same thing with just other manufacturers. I'm sure there's some ones out there that are not the greatest, but I think majority of them
Yeah,
are pretty good.
and look, I can make this comment as a relatively newer entrant into this world, is how I think of it anyway. I have been completely blown away with how just so fucking awesome everyone is in
Yeah,
this industry. Like really, really, because I was not that I thought about it a lot, Mike, but I was expecting um, a bit of attitude and a bit of this and a bit of that, and I haven't found any of it. All I've
yeah,
found is super helpful, nice people
yep,
that want to share stuff and talk about stuff and help you. Like the amount of help that I've had from everyone, including yourself, has just been humbling, to be honest.
there's no room in this planet, honestly, for animosity and to be a dick. I mean, honestly, like Kyle Rhodes was one of the first guys I met in the industry, and I can't tell you how much good times and how many laughs we've had. So
Yeah, he's a fun dude. I had
yes, he
a
is.
I had a night out with him and Shay. We talked about it a little
Oh,
bit.
I heard about that one.
Fuck, man, I needed my white pants on for that one. Um, I had I packed the whole social calendar of 2023 into that one night. So much stuff happened. It was one of those crazy nights, where like you just go, you think about all the things that happened in that one evening, and I go, "Fuck, man, it's so much stuff." And then when I speak to the guys about it, because I can't remember all of it, and they go,
Oh yeah,
what about this? What about that?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, forgot about it." It's
yeah.
fucking
For Kyle and I, it was a couple Nams worth. Oof. You mix a couple of our other friends in there, and it was there wasn't much sleep going on each day.
oh man, yeah, it's it's crazy. All right, so I'm just trying to push through this chat here, guys. There's a lot of commentary in here between yourselves, which is cool. It's making me hard to uh, making it hard to find something. Yeah, white pants are going to get stained. Yeah,
Oh, they do. Trust me. That's why I'm on my like fourth pair.
yeah. I was going to say, man, you need to have a few. Uh Mr. Woodchuck's got another aim question. Thank God. Uh, get away from the drinking stories. Did you ever get to hear the Rivera KR7 Mark II that was being built? I believe it had a
No,
garage door.
I didn't. I didn't actually know there actually was a Mark II that was going to be built. So I get to play through Mix, the ones that he used on tour, and the amount of low end those amps have is insane. It's so much bottom end. Probably the best clean channel you'll ever hear in a high gain amp. I mean, Paul Rivera Sr., I mean, his lineage is with Fender. I mean, he's absolutely a genius when it comes to cleans, but no, I never got to play a Mark II. I didn't know they actually they had one.
Me neither. KXM Rock is asking, what tubes do you have in the Obsidian, Mike?
So we actually moved to 6CA7s for the power tubes because we were doing a lot with 6L6 and EL34s. And the 6CA7 is kind of a blend between the two. It's actually a 6L6 structure, very similar to a 6L6, but that's in an EL34 bottle that you can actually bias hotter like an EL34. So you get a little bit more of the bottom end that a 6L6 has, far more mid-range like an EL34 has. So luckily our amps actually kind of display those sonic characteristics when you change the tubes pretty well. We were using KT66s, for a long time. We used them as an option, but they're very hard to get nowadays. And a couple of the manufacturers that did make them, I don't care for the new versions, or they were having reliability issues. So you can still order our amps with 6L6 or EL34 or KT77, but 6A7 or 6L6 are two that we primarily use the most.
Okay. What was it about the KT66s that you liked? The earlier
the 66s are kind of it's the kinkless triode design is kind of unique. But in regards to the 66, it had a lot of the same characteristics as the 6L6, was slightly more scooped, but not in a bad way.
Yeah.
And sounded a little bit wider, had almost a little bit more headroom to them, even though they're not clipping, even though you're not pushing the power section to clipping. Dynamics in the high end actually sounded a little bit more cleaner, and the lows actually have a little bit more like piano, like low end where you hear everything. We would still love to use them, but we just haven't found anything that is as good as the originals that we were getting from Tube Amp Doctor, and that is really readily available.
Cool. Big Sloppy is asking, I love these names, YouTube names. Always crazy. Hey all, is breadboarding and pedals a somewhat safer way of getting into circuitry and amplifiers down the line?
For pedals, I say yes. For amps, no.
Yeah, you're correct. Yeah, don't breadboard a high voltage tube amp.
Yeah, you don't want to get hit with 470 volts.
But I think this question does get asked a lot. Like in terms of, if you've never touched a soldering iron really, or kind of got into circuitry, then yeah, play with pedals is a good place to start. I didn't. I just went straight to amps, but many people have gone through the pedal kind of, not learning ground, I guess, but the pedal phase before they went into amps. So you can definitely do it. Mark saying, yeah, Magnatone announced his partnership with Slash. I saw that today, but I know that he and Richard Fortas have been using them for quite a while.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Kind of cool.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they're running them, but when I was in the States, Mike, I came back to LA after spending a week in Indiana and Ohio visiting Shay and Kyle, just through a connection, actually got to talk with Richard Fortas, and he said even back then they were both using. They hadn't really announced it, but they were using the Magnatones back then. So
That's
I think
crazy.
they've been using.
I honestly haven't played any modern Magnatones. Place down the street from us has some very old ones they have such a unique, cool sound. But yeah, I'm not the kind of player that goes for those.
No, it's not.
It's a whole different style. Same thing with like a Dumble. I can't do a Dumble justice. It's weird. You want me to play some decapitated riffs? I'm good, but no.
I've not played a real one, obviously, but I've played a few of the Seriatone ODS clones, which is probably where Nick kind of cut his teeth, right? I think he started with some of that Dumble stuff, didn't he?
Oh yeah.
And
Nick's awesome.
you pretend to be Robin Ford for a nanosecond, but it's
and then you realize, all right, I'm going to go over to something with more gain that hides a little bit of this.
They're pretty confronting, aren't they? To play like,
yes,
fire out. It's like
same thing with the train wreck.
Yeah, I've never. Yeah, look, I know Bob's really into the train wreck circuits, right? Yeah, big time.
He is.
Something I haven't really explored too heavily yet, to be honest.
He's building a bunch of your amps right now. He bought a bunch of the boards, or the boards that you actually brought out for us.
This is it.
Fun with some of those,
Yeah. So that was a. I remember that morning, man, because we were messaging. You know, you were messaging me on Facebook, and we were getting set. I was going to come in and meet you and Bob for a few beers and a pizza or whatever. And you're like, yeah, bring some boards in. Yeah, no worries. And then you said to me, "Oh, have you got one of your amps there? bring that in too."
Tell that whole story.
Well, yeah.
That's
so
kind of exciting.
Oh man, exciting. I had three Altas here. Two of them were sold and ready to ship, and then I had my own one, which is serial number 0, if you like, right? Final version. It wasn't a prototype. It was actually production spec. So I said to you, yeah, I've got my amp here, and I said, but why would I bring it in? And you said, well, Jim wants to try it. So I never actually. I don't know. I've never found out how this happened, but so I'll ask you now. How did Jim come to asking about that amp? Like, how did that happen?
Basically, I told his tech, Brad, I asked him, I said, because he was trying out some different amps. And I said, you think he'd be interested in trying this one out? And he's like, what is it? And I explained it. I was like, dude, the videos are pretty incredible. And he was like, yeah, he'd be down to try it out. And then basically, I saw Jim earlier in the day. I said, I have an amp coming for you. It'll be, he's like, what is it? I said, it's a brand you never heard of. He's like, okay. So it'll be in the jam room for you. And then, it all kind of went from there. He was like, yeah, I'm down to check it out. And then all of a sudden he was playing in the jam room and wouldn't stop playing it and kind of fell in love with it. So yeah,
he did. I remember. So that was, I handed you the amp on the Wednesday. That was when I came in and met you guys, right? And then the gig was on the Friday. Yeah. So you had arranged, a ticket and so on for me, which was awesome. And then on my way traveling out there, early afternoon, I guess it was, I think that was when Jim was in the jam room. I didn't think he didn't get to kind of play the amp till that Friday afternoon.
Correct. Yeah. Because we had there's no way. I think we had a day off before that. So
yeah, you did. Yeah.
I can't remember. Yeah.
I think anyway. Thursday was your setup day because you had you'd flown in from Jakarta on the Tuesday. Wednesday we caught up. Thursday you were setting up, and then Friday was
that's what it was.
The show day of the show, and there was some discussion with yourself and Bob that, and I obviously met Brad. I met Brad on the Friday on the day of the show, right backstage. And I've kept in contact with Brad. He's been awesome, actually.
Good,
great guy. And
oh yeah, he is.
Yeah, man, he's amazing. I follow his Instagram. If anyone who doesn't follow Brad Clifford on Instagram, I suggest you do. He's always posting interesting stuff. But yeah, so I was on my way out to the venue, Mike, when you started messaging me and you said, "Oh, Jim's playing the amp now," like now at that moment in time, and I was just like, yes, and waiting, sitting here with my nervously holding my phone while you were messaging me, and then I was watching the dots. You know how when someone's typing, you can see the dots like dot 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 dot. I'm like, come on, what's he gonna say? And I was
half tempted to tell you that it broke or that he hated it, just to joke with you.
Man, you would have destroyed me. You would have completely. And so he came back and you said something like, he loves it. He wants to buy it. How much? ? Right. So it went from there. And I think he played. If my memory serves me correct, I'm pretty sure on this because I think yourself, Bob, and Brad told me that you took the amp, you took that one, you played Sydney the next night. He didn't use it, but
correct.
The night after that was a Brisbane show, and he used it for the whole Brisbane show.
And it's been in the rig since.
Yeah, and he's taken another one which went into the other because you've got an A rig and an A rig and a B rig, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So everything we talked about before with regards to Mick's setup or with a whole backline setup, there's 2 complete duplicates.
Yep.
That's right?
Yes.
Yeah. Just stationed at different parts
all
of the world.
All 3 guys. So basically DJ, Mick, drums, the bass, and the guitar are all exact duplicates. So.
Yeah. So that's it's that whole thing with Jim's just been obviously awesome, great experience. And I built
Hopefully
that
it's
little.
got you some more sales too.
Yeah, that's being correct.
Just let me know when that commission check is in the mail.
Man, I owe you guys so much.
Nah,
Man. This is back to that whole thing about when Simon Hosford posted in this chat about just how nice everyone's been. This is like, that was just it's a really great example of it. But yeah, it's just how it is. Like, it's just how it is. Right. Where are we with this chat, guys? I got sidetracked there with my
sorry.
story. That's all right, man. I could talk about that anytime. There's a comment here. Scott Holiday from Rival Sons has been using modelers with his orange Supro cabs on stage. It's probably a bit like Metallica, isn't it? The Metallica using Axe-Fx, but then they actually pipe it out to cabs on stage, like real guitar cabs.
Yeah, so they're using Matrix power amps. And yeah, I mean, we didn't say that it doesn't work. It's just kind of a preference at times of what somebody wants to hear. I think a lot of it really depends on how much time somebody has actually spent setting it up. And by all means, like I said, there's people that are getting incredible sounds out of it. But so far I haven't been able to personally find from my ear something that sounds as good as a real analog tube amp or even solid state amp and a cab versus a modeling setup. But there's definitely guys that are getting it.
Yeah. I guess at that point it's all about getting the sound out front, and then whatever they're monitoring on stage is just for the player. Yeah,
100%. I mean, especially when you go direct, you have a good IR through your Axe-Fx, through your Quad Cortex, through your Helix, or whatever you may be playing. You have it going out front, and they can manipulate it in various different ways. You're going through the PA system, you're going through the console out front. They're changing everything. They're not just leaving it as a dry signal. They're actually putting high pass and low pass filters on it. They're doing EQing. They're doing different tricks. A lot of bands and a lot of front of house guys, they're even using plugins or outboard gear to actually manipulate the sound to get it more like studio sounds. So that's not to say though, that just like what Jason said, you may not be getting that exact same sound on stage as what you're hearing from the PA. Because it's going through a lot, just like albums, any record. You're not just hearing the amp into the cab into one mic and then direct in. There's a lot of EQing. There's a lot of tricks involved. There's a lot of different stuff, double tracking, quad tracking, compressors, limiters, various EQs, sometimes stacked EQs. All that plays a major role in what you're actually hearing versus what the actual true rig is.
Yeah, 100%. And man, have you found like dialing a rig in or an amp in for studio versus live, even in, think about the way that Mick runs it, would you often dial them in the same or very differently for those two scenarios?
It depends on the amp, but yeah, typically it's going to be a little bit different. You have a little bit more freedom in the studio because you have so many different ways of manipulation. And you can sit there and carefully carve and contour things, where in the live performance, you need to have it make sure that it cuts through the mix. So if you try to scoop your amp, the mids out in a live situation, you're going to get lost. Whereas in a studio, you can kind of get away with that. So yeah, there's definitely a difference in a studio setting versus a live setting. There are people that use the exact same settings for live and for studio, and it works. It all just depends. There's so many variables. Depends on the style of music, the tuning, the amount of distortion in the signal, pedals, you name it. It's just a lot of variables, just like everything else.
Yeah, super cool. There's a question here from Jay. Hey, Jason, I hope you're living high and wide, man. Yeah, living the dream, brother. Living the dream. It's a question for the dude on your right, which would be you, Mike. Question for Mike. Hey, y'all, are you all planning on a preamp / distortion pedal in the future?
I plead the fifth at the moment.
I can see that smile. That's a smile that means something.
I'll say it this way. There's so many things that we want to do. There's so many things that are possible, but being a small company, being, that, everybody right now is inundated with getting builds done, and we're still trying to do engineering on the side as well. Um, it's something that we want to do. It's something we plan on, but we don't have any definitive dates. And the only way that we're actually going to release anything is if it meets or exceeds our expectations and actually provides something for the end user that
Yep.
is not just a clone of something, or that it's like, oh, this is good enough. It actually has to be a functional piece of gear that is going to be, you know, very useful, versatile, and represent our company in a good way. We don't want to
Because
put
it's
anything
just
out that's not indicative of what we already make.
because it's a super saturated market in
Very
pedals, right? So
saturated.
you kind of need to figure out like what it, because I often think about that. I think about lots of things, right? But one of those
Yeah.
like, oh, is there a pedal in my future or whatever? And we talked a bit about this with Kyle when he was on as well, from a design perspective, actually, in
Yeah.
terms of the kind of like, how can you take knowledge that you've gained from tube amp design into the solid state world with pedals? And his answer was kind of
He's done
yes. And
pretty good with it. A couple of the companies have done really good with it as well.
yeah,
Um, it's just one of those things that, yes, it would be a great moneymaker for us. It would be great to increase, the outreach of our brand to people that don't want to buy a full on amp. But it also comes down to, I almost feel like, since we're so used to building tube amps, once we get into the solid state realm, which, we would love to do, I have no problem with any solid state amp. Some of them sound insanely incredible. But it's something that's going to take longer because it's something that we don't have it's not our main foray. It's, tubes have been that. So while we really do want to make one, um, it's hard to say when it would happen, what features it's going to have, etc.
yeah, totally. And what about, man? Have you ever thought about rack gear? Is that something that you think? Do you think that? Well, do you think there's a market in that anymore?
100%. I
Yeah,
love rack gear.
yeah, I know, and we love it. We
I'm
all
looking
love it.
over it. I'm looking over at some beautiful things over here right now.
We love it.
So
I love it too, and a lot of people do. It's a bit of a. I
yeah,
think I said last week with Dave when Dave was on, we talked a bit about that and said, is it a nostalgia thing, or is it
I don't think
truly a
so,
new market there?
to be honest. So here's my take on rack gear. I think it actually has a bigger future than what people anticipate, because everybody's trying to go smaller, everybody's trying to go modular,
Yep,
and people need things to be able to travel with. Because a lot of boutique brands like myself, like you, like many others, we don't have the capability of supplying to numerous different backline companies. If one of our artists goes over to Germany, goes to Australia, etc.,
totally.
doing something at his rack is going to be a smaller format, oftentimes a little bit lighter weight, that is going to be easier to travel with, easier to bring. People don't pay attention and don't realize how much cartage costs for getting like Slipknot's rigs when we ship those over to Europe.
Oh man, I can
One
imagine.
case, I mean, I hate to say it, one case that is basically just spares for the past 4 years, just shipping, you're talking 75,000 to $90,000 for a case of spare pedals and wire, etc. So shipping is incredibly expensive when you're talking about doing that. So rack gear, being smaller, being more compact, oftentimes lighter, can be kind of the direction that is great to go. A lot of the modelers, are rack based, and why not have more amplifiers and
They are. They are.
preamps and power amps and stuff that are very cool to mix and match. That's my opinion on it.
I'm in, man. I'm
If
in.
that gives a little bit of information away, whatever.
I think it's a good perspective, and I think that I was talking to a pro player here the other day he's actually looking for that kind of solution, and
Yeah.
the conversation started with kind of preamp based, like a tube preamp based approach, but he's very cognizant of not having that on the floor.
Yeah.
Just like doesn't want to have that on the floor out in front. And particularly in some of the places where you play in Australia, there's a bit of beer flowing around or whatever. You don't kind of want that stuff
Yeah.
on the ground on the floor, but
Um,
having it back in a still portable, but in a rack. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
So, everybody's ideas are different on that aspect. My personal opinion on it is once you actually start to bring stuff down to such a small size where it's going to fit in a pedal, there can be compromises. Some people make them, and I'm just like, how the hell did you actually get something this small to sound that amazing? Um, but from a longevity standpoint, we would prefer to keep things off the floor and use a controller to actually control it. Yes, it does take up more space. Yes, it is a separate component. It can increase cost because it is two separate components, but we're more in the game for professional use and longevity of the product. It's not to say that those products aren't going to last, they could last forever, but with it, we've never built a floor based, tube preamp pedal. And, some companies make them, they sound great, but
Yep.
I don't think we're going to go down that exact route.
Yeah, cool. Understandable. Quick question here from Simon. Is your favorite bare knuckle pickup?
Oh, damn it. It's putting me on the spot. Is it the cold sweat or honestly, I'm terrible. And if
That's all
Tim
good,
from
man.
Bare Knuckles sees this, I'm very sorry. It's either the cold sweat, the nail bomb. It's not their super high output one. The Aftermath
Yeah.
was really cool. It's one that's more of a PAF style.
Yeah.
It's a little bit higher output than a standard PAF.
That sounds like I've got the VH2 from Bare Knuckle, and
I haven't tried that one yet.
that's killer. This is hottish. It's not like a JB style. Like it's I would say a hot PAF. I think it's down Eco 2. It's great in a super strat for that thing.
Yeah.
All right, we're getting through the stuff. Jerry says, how's it been working with Jim? Yeah, amazing. A lot of contact through Brad. So probably Mike, probably very similar how you work with Mick, where on behalf of Mick, I would imagine that you do facilitate a lot of conversation with other suppliers and so on.
It kind of keeps things a little bit smoother and easier because with us being the techs, us being the ones that are hands-on with all the gear, it is a lot easier for us to handle endorsements because those guys, they do get busy with interviews. They get busy with a lot of band stuff, a lot of management stuff. So it's typically that, endorsers, companies, they actually work with the techs, on a higher level.
Yeah. And Brad's been just awesome in that regard. I mean, I've had some contact with Jim in terms of direct messaging and so on, but he's been nothing short of fantastic, but I'm very, very respectful
awesome.
of that. I certainly don't, I don't message him and just routinely, hey man,
what's going on, dude? What are you watching?
What are you doing, man? You're like, yeah, not at all. But he does message me and say nice things about the amp, so I'm very happy about that. Yeah, Ben. Hey Ben. Ben's here in Adelaide, Australia, and check him out, man. He does one awesome pickups. Blown away by how cool this must be the amp community is. I wish pickup guys weren't such dicks. And yeah, I'm aware of the irony because you're a pickup guy. Yeah, man. You're part of the problem or part of the solution?
I haven't met really. Oh no, I have. I've met one person. I'm not going to mention any names that I don't even know if they're still in business. I would never recommend anybody to buy his stuff just because he had very strong opinions on things.
Pickup guy?
Yeah, he had very strong opinions on people's lifestyles, and I don't approve of that. But no, I haven't experienced that, but I can understand where you're coming from because I've heard the same thing from people in the pedal community, pedal builders, saying that some pedal builders are, kind of all high and mighty. And sorry, love to check out some of your pickups though.
Yeah. I haven't. I don't know. I haven't experienced that yet, but I'm certainly aware that it's out there.
Yeah, I think majority of the animosity, to be honest, is between people and forums, and I think it's a little ridiculous. I can't stand it. I get dragged into so many different Facebook groups, and I end up leaving because I'm just like, why? Why is there so much hate? Why is there so much animosity between people? It doesn't make any sense. If somebody likes a piece of gear, they like a piece of gear. If they don't, just, let it be.
Yeah, oh man, yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and it can be a horrible place, right? Some of that stuff on the internet is just
It's
like,
toxic as can be, and misinformation. It's
yeah,
it 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 gets pretty comical the amount of misinformation that you'll see in some of these
oh
groups
god,
about
yeah,
just about anything. It's pretty funny.
yeah. Um, we're nearly through these questions, Mike. Vince is asking, what would be the advantage of adding local feedback in a preamp stage? Yeah, you do see this a little bit. You see it in the Jubilee
Yep.
circuit, for example.
Reduces gain a little bit, makes it so it's actually tamed.
Yeah, it's a way of chilling out that stage, and you can obviously do that through different means as well. But yeah, I've seen some cool stuff done where I've seen some designs where that feedback stage has been filtered in some way as well. So you're getting a bit like how you have a presence and a depth circuit on the negative feedback line within the power amp. You do a similar thing at a preamp stage to actually change the dynamic response of that gain stage.
Some amps desperately need it too.
Yeah,
Just the amount of gain that they have.
too much gain. Man, there is it's funny, isn't it? There's stuff out there that is just like, I don't know, too many stages, too much gain. Even some of the stuff that Marshall, after Marshall kind of moved on from into sort of the the DSL era, the JCM
TSL and
2000s.
JVM.
It's too much gain for me, man. Right.
I like a lot of gain, but I guess it's the style of gain. I mean, some amps, the amount of gain stages that they have, and then they also have clipping added on. You're just like, then you have to use local negative feedback to reduce that gain. But then again, it does add a character. It adds a texture to it that you couldn't get otherwise with with less gain stages.
Yeah.
And
this is it, man. Mr. Woodchuck saying, with your 4x12 mic, would you recommend the V30 DV77s in an X pattern or 2 and 2?
So honestly, I do prefer an X pattern. There's a lot of controversy about mixing speakers, whether it be side to side, X pattern, or top and bottom. In my opinion, in order to get the best, the most consistent soundscape based on where you are in the room, I do like the X pattern of the V30 and DV77. I think it's a little bit better than just having one speaker on top and one speaker on the bottom. Because once you're actually standing a couple feet away from a cab, the two speakers, while they're different, the V30 is going to have more fizz. The DV77 is going to have a little bit more low mid growl and a little bit more low end. Once you start to step away, that actually starts to sound more like one single speaker versus going top and bottom. I understand why some people go top and bottom or side by side. I personally don't like side by side at all because you walk over here, it's completely different than over here.
Totally.
But an X pattern gives you the ability to actually have all those sounds generate into one source almost from a small distance away and just alter the sound, give you some different coloration.
What's the efficiency match between the V30 and the DV77?
They're almost identical. They're almost identical. And so there's a big misunderstanding about the overall SPL rating. So the SPL rating is not your actual max level of how loud the speaker is.
Okay.
Speakers are actually measured 1 meter with a 1 watt power source, and that measures the SPL, and it's a nominal SPL. It's not the peak. So with the DV77 and the V30, they're both right around 99 to 100 dB for that SPL rating. If you actually overlay the two frequency plots over with each other, the V30 has a little bit more 1 to 2.5K than the DV77 does, but it's not drastic. The V30 also drops off faster on the top end, but then introduces a little bit more 10 and 12K than what the DV77 does. It introduces in a few different areas. But overall volume between the two is very, very close. And to everybody that thinks that the DV is supposed to be a V30 style speaker, it's not. It was never meant to be. It's its own thing. It does share some similar component materials like a Nomex voice coil former, which has a unique sound. That's the V30 is the only speaker from Celestion that uses that voice coil former that I know of. but the cones are different. The motor structures are similar but different because they're built by two different manufacturers. Um, the DV was supposed to be something that got the sonic characteristics of a speaker with that has a small dust cap, not like a GK like everybody thinks it's modeled after. He Mick wanted something that was a little bit more classic sounding, but had modern attributes in the mid range without excessive fizz in the top end, and with a lot of separation of notes, and it was able to handle a good amount of gain and a good amount of low end without getting mushy.
Fantastic. Andrew saying he's just tuning in. Love all the Omega amps I've played. That's cool.
Thank you.
Is the Granifier based off something pre-existing or totally original? Mike talked about this before, Andrew, and kind of said, there's some, I guess, some connection to the SLO in terms of inspiration and so on.
Just in the very early stages.
Yeah.
After that, it's pretty drastically different.
Yeah, and yes, it's very different. Let's just see what else we got here, Mike. I think we might be through all this, man.
Cool.
Which is awesome. Paul's saying, "Great live stream, thanks, gents." Here, nice to have you here,
Thank
Paul.
You, Paul.
So we're nearly at the 2.5 hour mark, and I know it's getting late for you. It must be towards getting towards 11 o'clock, I guess. So, man,
yeah, it's 11:01 right now.
Well, I won't hold you any longer. Hey, thanks for coming on, man. That's been
absolutely
awesome.
It was a blast.
It's been fantastic. And hang on the line for a sec, man. I'll just sign off for everyone. So, guys, we'll be back again next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. I'll let you know who's coming on. We've got a couple of pretty exciting guests coming on. So that should be a blast next week.
Thanks everybody for joining. Thanks for all the questions and compliments. And
I'll catch you later, guys.